Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm sure we're going to have lots of people rolling in throughout sessions. Those who were here yesterday, we're kind of starting today in a little bit of a similar fashion, although we'll obviously say a few different things. But we're going to start with just a review of what we did yesterday and how we're proceeding with the day. And then also we'll move into an icebreaker before we get started with our sessions. So nice to see those early on a Saturday. Not Saturday, on a Friday morning. My name is Joanna Veronkovich, and I'm one of the faculty directors for the Center for Cultural Affairs.
And I'm Doug Noonan, one of the other faculty directors at the Center for Cultural Affairs. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I guess if you're in Europe, good afternoon. But thank you all for coming back for the second day. We want to thank our sponsors for the event, the National Endowment for the Arts, big-time sponsor for our research lab here, as well as our fantastic staff who's controlling all the important moving parts behind the scenes. And thanks to everybody for coming back a second day and for being here on the first day. And thanks in advance to our panelists we've got for today, as well as the roundtable discussions with a keynote speaker later this morning. We've got a great lineup.
Yeah. So just a little bit about what we're trying to do here today and what we were trying to do yesterday, in case that you're new to the room today. So the focus of the symposium is really on arts engagement in our experiences with audiences and our experiences with art, and not so much on the creation or the production side. So today we're going to be hearing from some arts organizations who are experimenting with using AI in presenting. So we'll be hearing, for example, from a couple of folks who work within arts organizations. We'll also be talking about some research. That's the first session we'll be starting off with this morning, with some practical examples about how organizations in the sector are engaging with AI in the presentation of art. But when we issued the call for papers, which we have just a few papers from yesterday and today, we really did try to emphasize that because there was so much work going on in terms of the creation of art with AI and integrating AI, we really wanted to make that special focus on what happens when the audience starts engaging with AI. How does our art change? How do the implications change? What are the consequences for culture, art, and society? So that's hopefully where our discussions are going to be leading us today. But maybe if you are curious about what the discussions talked about yesterday, you could take a look at the symposium summary we posted yesterday. And I think that's probably now in the chat. So if you could if we could just put that link in the chat. We went ahead and we summarized yesterday's events. We also highlighted some really neat things that happened as a result of some of our AI experimentation. So maybe, Doug, you can talk a little bit about what we're doing in the background.
Yeah, well, while we say we summarized yesterday's events, that's probably overstating. We had AI summarize yesterday's events. So we've put this in a document that you can get from a big button that's on the symposium webpage. You can follow one of the links in the chat and look at this doc. It also has in there some of the text transcript bits for where we had AI asking questions to the roundtable participants. We had AI trying to impersonate our keynoter yesterday and answer questions for Brett Crawford, and then we can see how Brett Crawford reacted to it. So we've sort of chronicled some of that from yesterday's experience, where, again, part of our goal here was to simulate some of the use cases for AI in terms of audience engagement. As an attendee, or someone as a patronizing the arts, how might you use AI? And some of it is to probe the art and figure out what more can we learn from it? What questions would we ask of the artist? Or if the artist were here, how might the artist respond? Those kinds of use cases. We did sort of simulated some of that yesterday with the symposium. And so a lot of that's captured in that document that's up on the symposium page. You can click that little button to get to it.
Yeah. So do check that out. We're going to be doing more of the AI experimentation today, a little bit differently, but also a little bit of the same. And we'll announce right before each session what we're planning on doing. We'll do something different for each session. And then we also have an ongoing activity that you can take part in throughout the conference that we'll get into in just a little bit. But before we do that, let's just go over some logistics. So first off, this is all being recorded. And after the symposium, we will post the videos to the YouTube channel for the Center for Cultural Affairs. So do check that out. Obviously, they're long videos, but hopefully you can navigate through and see what's of interest to you. Also, if you want to check out the program, we do have our program online on the Center for Cultural Affairs website. So that's culturalaffairs.indiana.edu. And you can follow along. Feel free to come in and out of the Zoom room all day. You don't need to stay in. We'll be letting people in and out pretty freely throughout the day. And we're always keeping an eye on that waiting room. So please do feel free to come in and out. And also, please do share some of the content that you hear today on your social media. We do try to get out the word out a little bit on our social media. For example, on LinkedIn, you can find us. On Twitter, you can find us. And the hashtag for today's event is #AI@AEI.
So for the program this morning, we're going to be starting off, as Joanna mentioned, with the research panel. We have the two people who are on the program right now, Vitali Banerjee and Annie Tubaji, and we're going to sandwich in between them a returning guest from yesterday. So Nandini Giri, who had a hard time getting her audio to work yesterday, we're going to try to squeeze her in this morning panel as well. So that's a small update to the program. There's going to be 3 people presenting this morning in our research panel. Then we'll have a little live demonstration of some AI tools during that AI workout bit at about 10:30. And then we'll go into our keynoter where we're bringing in Lyndon Walcott-Burton from London, who's done some amazing work in sort of compiling all the different ways that we are using AI throughout the arts and culture sector. It's an amazing presentation. We don't have nearly enough time to get into all the details of it, but he'll give you a big overview of the compilation he's put together. It's quite remarkable. And then we close out the morning and the symposium with another AI applications roundtable where we're going to be talking about what a lot of organizations are already doing and where they could be going next in terms of adopting these AI tools. So it's an exciting program today with some amazing people on here, and I'm really glad that you're all here to join for it.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. And please do try to engage and interact throughout the symposium. We're trying to welcome this as much as possible, and we'll give you a couple of options and talk about that in just a bit for how you can engage and how you can continue to possibly use AI to complement your experience here, because we are trying to obviously encourage the use of these AI tools in ways that can complement our experiences, even as an audience member in a symposium. One last note, if you want to do closed captioning, you can just manage that on your own. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a closed captioning button. So please do feel free to use that. We don't have closed captioning going on for the symposium as a whole. Every participant in the Zoom room can manage that independently if they'd wish. So that's all we have for logistics. And we're just going to move now quickly into our icebreaker to start off our morning.
And like we did yesterday, we had a poll where we got some feedback and some interactivity to begin with. So we'll start with a couple new questions for today.
Great. So it looks like my polling is inactive for some reason, Doug. So maybe you can pull the poll too.
I will do what I can here.
Thanks a lot. Tech problems all the time, trying to figure out.
Hopefully it's going. There it is. And our first question on this poll was inspired by our keynoter yesterday, who asked everybody, sort of, did you use AI to prepare as you attended the symposium? Then we got a couple other questions, which I'll give everybody a chance to answer. I will say the last 2 questions are open-ended. Just type in your response. And I will encourage anybody, as you're answering these questions about how you might expect AI to have big impacts in the arts and culture sector in the future, or how you hope AI will have big impacts in the future, feel free to copy the text of your answer and paste it into the chat if you want to share out with the rest of the group. Because when we discuss these poll results, we won't actually get to see the text answers people provide. So if you want to share those with the group, feel free. Because we have some fill in the blank type text answers. We'll give you a little bit more time.
A little more time, yeah.
Yesterday, in this lightning poll.
Best thing to do in the summer is start a Friday morning off with a little homework, huh? Great. Yeah, use those thumbs up signs. We like those. Hmm. Mm-hmm. How are we doing, Doug?
Yeah, we can move.
Okay.
Another one.
Great. All right. So we have a few responses in the chat. And yeah, what do our results look like? Great. We have 8% of people who don't want to use AI tools. I like it. Really.
Lots of variety in the answers there.
Great. For anybody who said that they're going to use, for question 3, how would you like to use AI tools in the future, something else, do feel free to also put in those something else's in the chat so we can see what you mean.
Yeah, curious about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And this is not meant to be so passive or just limiting you to your keyboard and typing in. You can unmute and share some thoughts if you'd like. We can raise your hand. You can type in more things into the chat, of course, but feel free to engage here. This is our warming up, getting the juices flowing, especially for those people on the West Coast. This is the cup of coffee. Let's get some energy going here.
Yeah, for sure. So does anybody want to volunteer? This is what I do in my classes. Does anybody want to volunteer any of their answers that they might want to share? You can either chat it or unmute yourself. I have UI backend and front end development for landing pages. Absolutely.
I like
so
that.
AI, yeah.
That was a theme that came up yesterday. I was a little surprised, but I shouldn't be. And it's interesting that people are keying in on how much of the indirect ways that we're going to be using AI and the way that it's on the back end and that it's infiltrating. I think that's interesting to have people so aware of it.
Absolutely. And, AI has absolutely revolutionized the world of coding. I don't know any coder at this point who doesn't use an AI tool to go in and ask, what's the code for this? What's the code for that?
Right.
Sorry, so for me, it's much more like since I don't know coding, I just learned from my brother who actually is. And the best thing that you can use for that, Google something like how to do this and that in a web page, because it's so much easier to figure something myself out than trying to explain what I want to do for a person who is really not into arts and don't really understand and don't really want to understand the whole thing. And if something just not working right, the AI, you can ask the AI like, okay, what's the problem with this code if I want to achieve this? And that is so that is the best, and this is so awesome.
Well, and I think Brett Crawford talked yesterday about how many organizations at this point are using AI tools for functional activities. I mean, from ticket purchasing to using it to identify potential donors, those types of activities that, in traditionally take a lot of man hours, a lot of labor hours, but how we are able to obviously save time and be much more efficient with those.
It's an interesting part. Another theme that was mentioned yesterday about how AI is helping, and just generally digitization is helping increase the amount of accessibility to being able to generate and create art, and sort of this TikTok explosion of more creators out there able to create content. And to the extent that AI facilitates that and makes it easier for anyone to create, that's an interesting impact of AI. On the other end, it's also about how it might allow people who are facing barriers to more technical work, like well, technical to some, writing code as opposed to technical to others, like playing a violin. It can work in both directions, both on making artists out of people who weren't artists before, but also making coders out of people who are artists before, and that's an interesting duality.
Yeah. So it's interesting too. For question 4, I'm looking at some of these responses, and actually there are a few people who mentioned how AI tools are going to help provide greater access to underserved populations. Curious to think about how that's going to take place. Does anybody want to offer their ideas for how that might in practice happen? I don't know, Doug, what do you think? How might that in practice work?
Well, the one piece, especially if I was sort of just living off of yesterday's content, it comes out of some of the things Brett was saying about how AI can help us better identify our audiences and almost identify with them. One of the challenges we might have is only knowing sort of ourselves. And if AI can help us either through some of the analytics it's got, or being able to be drawing from a bigger pool of information, may help arts organization or artists be able to reach audiences that they're not normally in their own network and have firsthand familiarity with.
Yeah, hopefully some of the sessions can touch on this, because we had at least 3 responses for question 4 that touched on accessibility issues for where they hope AI could have the biggest influence.
Yeah, we're working on another project. Joanne and I were looking at museums and how they might put messaging up on their websites or next to exhibits and explain things. And if you've got a bunch of curators with graduate degrees in art history or something writing the content for this, you might be reaching a very different audience than if you had an AI help you be able to speak in different ways and communicate differently. Those sorts of tools might be more available and help with translation and bridging some gaps that currently are often taken for granted and much larger than we might expect them to be.
Yeah. So moving on, we do want you to use some AI tools while you're engaging with us today in the conference. And we put together a few tips for how you might think about using AI. Let's see here. Hopefully you can see my screen. So actually, the AI helped us put together a few tips for how to enhance your symposium experience. So why not? right? So here's a few ways that you can learn with us today and engage with us and use the AI. So you can obviously, anything that you hear in the sessions that you might want some more background information on, you can use an AI tool to figure out what some resources, additional resources might be, what a particular word means. If that, let's say, in maybe the research panel, one of our researchers is using a little jargon, you can get obviously real-time information. You'll see in our summary of the symposium yesterday, we created a summary. It's very much a summary like it is, you know, a committee meeting or something like that, but you get these action points and the main points that were discussed yesterday. Follow-up questions. So we're going to be using the AI tools to generate some questions for our session panelists in some discrete ways at points. Also summarizing and reflecting, follow-up communication. Maybe you see somebody on the participants list that you'd like to engage with, and the AI can help you write that email. So I know that I use the AI to help me write some emails. Continued learning. And then we put some example interactions with the ChatGPT in particular, but you can use any AI tool at the bottom here. So that brings me to our next point, which is how we are going to hopefully try to stimulate a little bit of audience engagement throughout the symposium today, which is something different than what we did yesterday. I don't know, Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're trying out today?
Yeah. So yesterday we had one of our great staffers, Bashir, be the human face of the AI bot, where he had an AI bot help participate and join in with the discussion yesterday. And I think one thing we all learned, if you were here all day, was that the AI bot wants to allay your fears that it is not coming for your job, it is not going to replace human creativity, and it will not take over the planet. It was very insistent and persistent on this messaging, which was comforting, I suppose. We don't need to hear that again today. So we've given a new task for Bashir with this AI experience, and a lot of this is really meant to replicate how some of the ways that we think AI might be used, or people will experiment in using AI to improve their engagement with some artistic or some experience. And so this will be our experience, the symposium half day. Bashir, no expert in the topic, a student who wants to learn and engage with this material even more. So we've asked Bashir to use AI to help with that as he sees fit, as he might invent. And so he's going to be doing this in the background for part of his experience with this, and asking AI and using those tools and those tips that Joanna was just talking about. And he's going to be posting those experiences to a Google Doc that we've shared out there in the cloud for anyone to go and look at throughout the day and see what Bashir is up to and how examples of how AI might be helping him. And also at the end of all of this symposium, we will include that in the summary doc, a recap of how that worked out for him. And I think maybe most importantly, for anybody else who's trying to use AI to assist them in any way with this symposium experience, maybe getting AI to explain some terms or find some links or whatever, you can feel free to paste your own experiences and examples in this shared Google Doc that's going on in the background. So we've got the link up there for people to use. Feel free to post your own examples in there, or just follow along as Bashir is using this to enhance his engagement with this experience, a sort of meta example of AI and arts engagement.
All right. So we're excited because, yes, Bashir, Bashir is our student who is not at all, I believe is not, so he's not in the arts administration program. He's not in one of our programs that have to do with arts and culture here. So this is a new experience for him, and we'd like to see how the AI obviously enhances his experience and helps with understanding. Great. Yep. So let's just go forward a little bit. We have about 5 more minutes before we take a break and we go into our first session. But, you know, I think one thing we wanted to do today is also just make sure that everybody was on the same page. We've been using 2 AI tools primarily. If you have used AI, you probably have the tools that are comfortable for you and familiar to you. If not, we've been recommending to use either ChatGPT or Claude. And we won't go into a tutorial today about how to use those, but check them out. they have free versions if you've never signed up for them before. They also have paid versions, and you can use the AI tools again in any way you like. It's just a matter of inserting a prompt and seeing what happens and training your AI to do for it what you want. So you could even develop your own little chatbot for today's symposium.
And one other thing I wanted to sort of riff on or highlight this morning, and actually it's nice because Jennifer already put it in the chat as one of her answers to the poll questions about AI bots writing grant applications and then AI bots reviewing them. And I can, Brett Crawford mentioned yesterday about having AI bots as students. I think we're already there as a lot of people in academia, and we have AI help us write our papers, and then we'll have AI reviewing these papers. And all of this reminded me, and Joanna put a graphic up at the end of the day yesterday about an audience entirely composed of AI bots. And it got me thinking back now 40 years ago to an ancient movie where there was once upon a time a classroom full of students, and then by the end of the semester, things had radically changed. And I think there's an interesting question here about the extent we use now recording devices or other technology will sit in the audience and substitute for the humans being there. And maybe at some point maybe we reach the limit where there is no one left in the audience. And maybe you're the last human who decides to walk into that classroom. But when you get there, it's not just, no students anymore, just devices. We even replace the instructor with a recording. And I love the dated technology and all of this, but I also love that math on tape is hard to follow. Arts from robots may be hard to follow, but if it's the robots talking to the robots, maybe it works out a bit better. But I think this is sort of an interesting thing for us to think about, how the art might change as the audience is being assisted by the AI or other tech. But maybe it's not about the art changing, it's about just how the art's engagement experience will change. So all of this reminded me it's a good excuse to show some real genius clips from the mid-'80s.
So Doug and I were chatting this morning about how so much of what we're talking about today and yesterday actually was similar to what we were talking about 40 years ago, and how amazing it is that some of these ideas really don't change so much. Maybe the implementation of these ideas do change along the way, but we've had these fears of technology and these ideas of technology apocalypse for a really long time. So that's our attempt at actually a little bit to try to change the course of the conversation. Yesterday's conversation, we ended on maybe a little bit of a pessimistic note about what the AI could how the AI could potentially be harming what our engagement with the arts is going to look like in the future. I did mention in some of our sectors, we're seeing declining audiences overall. Sometimes we're having trouble with bringing audiences back in person, especially since the pandemic. But we really want to get off to a different start today. Maybe not with, I think also with the research session, you'll see a little bit of a different course, which is we're going to try to look at this in a little bit more of an optimistic perspective. And I think especially the roundtable you're going to see today is going to have that optimistic perspective about how organizations are using AI tools in order to enhance the audience experience. So great clip to start with, maybe a little bit an apocalyptic sort of pessimistic clip, but it's a good launch for the new direction that we're going to start to take today. So I think that's it.
All right. Well,
yeah.
We can pause. I want to give at least 60 seconds here for anyone has a question they want to throw it out to us or to the group. Make sure you have a chance. So if you want to go beyond just putting it in the chat. If there's not seeing anything, this is the time in the morning for you to go get a refill on your caffeinated beverage. Stretch your legs, and we're going to be starting at 9:35 with the first research panel.
Okay. See you soon.
See you in 5.
Hi, Doug.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you want me to check if I can share my slides? I think my understanding is the order of the presentation is I start and then Nandini and then Annie.
Yes, you're first. So let's make sure
Well,
we'll make you.
Natalia, I think you should have received co-host privileges. So Rebecca's going to give those to you. And so
Yes.
hopefully, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you hear me today?
Oh, actually, I don't have them. I just checked.
Yeah, you'll get it in a second.
Oh, you.
Okay.
Do you hear me today? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Oh, great.
Although
can
it's a little soft, Nandini, but we
It's
can hear
soft?
you.
1 minute. Is it better now?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Great. Maybe I'll just keep it close to my mouth. Yeah.
Nandini, try sharing, screen sharing.
Sure.
Karina took her screen sharing
No,
down.
it was Matali who wanted to practice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She's Phyllis's guest. Look at that.
So you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we're gonna start. We're gonna sandwich Nandini in the middle. So we'll go sort of alphabetical. Natalie will go first, and then Annie, assuming Annie's still on the call here, she's gonna go last.
We can put that slide back up.
Okay, as everybody is getting back to their desks or devices of some sort, I want to welcome you all back. We're going into our research panel for today on AI frontiers. We're going to squeeze in 3 presenters, so these are going to be sort of short presentations, but hopefully we'll save time at the end for some good discussion. My plan here is we're going to go through each of the three speakers, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. But as each of the speakers goes, feel free to post your questions in the chat or use the Q&A function. Post those questions. I'll moderate the discussion at the end. And even if we don't have time to get to your questions over the course of the rest of the morning or afternoon for you, Annie Tubaji, they'll have a chance to answer those possibly asynchronously. But please put your questions and comments up in the chat and in the Q&A. And I want to warn each of the speakers, we've taken the research question for your paper you're presenting, and we've asked a chat bot to answer the question for you to save you the trouble of writing the paper you have just written. And I will share with you the answers that the AI has provided. I'll put that in the chat after you've done your talk, and you can reflect on that and realize the incredible value added your humanity and your hard labor in doing the research has brought to this world. But you can reflect on those as we start the Q&A session. But without any other ado and listening to me at all anymore, I want to introduce our first speaker here, Mitali Banerjee from McGill University, who's going to start us off with a presentation. Take it away, Mitali.
Thank you, Doug. So I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully you can all see it.
Perfect.
Great. So thank you, Joanna and Doug, for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And so this session is going to be a bit, I know a lot of the focus has been on audience engagement. This will, in some sense, touch on both audience engagement and also the role that AI may play for creative production, where the value might come from and what it might change. That's kind of one of the big implications of this study. So, and this is work with my co-author, Daniel Kaplan. And what I do in my research is I use a lot of AI tools. So in many ways, my very simplistic view of having used these tools is there have been a couple of breakthroughs that could define these big shifts in AI. AI has been with us for a long time, as Brett pointed out yesterday. And but the big breakthroughs that happened one was change in how we are able to represent complex input. The second was transfer learning, and the third is transformers. In 2017, when you saw Google Translate become really better, transformers was one of the reasons why it improved, and it's also behind the large language models that power many of the chatbot tools now. So, and I'm here going to focus on the representation part, and I use that extensively in my research, and this is an application of that. So this is Kendrick Lamar's album Dawn, and then there is the Michael Gilbertson string quartet. These were the front runners for the 2018 Pulitzer Prize. And so what is interesting is these are two very, very different creative products. And yet, this is something we do all the time. We order creative products. Kendrick Lamar's Dawn ended up winning the Pulitzer Prize. But the key point here is we are ordering creative products, very different ones, all the time. And there are lots of ways of ordering. So there are explicit awards or canonical lists that we see in creative industries. And there's also the implicit one. And our focus here is one of these implicit ones, where it is the amount of attention a producer gets in media, which most of you will agree is a very important form of ordering, an important reward, and also means to other kinds of awards. And the question we want to ask is, can we infer an ordering of this attention, the media attention that a producer gets, just by looking at the work? And what our study does is use AI to do that. So we use AI to actually represent creative products, in this case, artworks, in a common aesthetic space, in a vector space, but it is the space of features induced from this work. And we ask this question is so we have this 3D simplified representation of this vector space that we are representing other artworks in. Once we do that, can we use that information in that space about these artworks to infer something about which artists are going to get more attention. So this is kind of, in some sense, you're going purely from the work and trying to infer something about how audiences actually come to value these works. So can we just use the work to infer something about audiences' valuation? So this is what the project tries to do. And our sort of proposition, to kind of simplify it, is that the closer any given producer's work is to an ideal, which I will shortly define, in this space that we map from the work, the higher the producers or a position in the ordering, the higher, in this case, the attention that a producer will get. So what do we mean by ideal? We actually look at two different kinds of ideal. One is you come closer to your community, to the artist, and an artist comes closer to their community of peers. And the other, which we call peer distinctiveness. And the other one is you strive towards this platonic center that in a lot of fields, artists are striving towards some kind of an ideal, a collective ideal. It's not something very specific. It is platonic, it's hypothetical, and it is so that point in space. So where does AI come in? So AI has, as yesterday was pointed out, has a long history, and it was deep neural nets that we use here, which again, neural nets go back to the 1950s. What changed in the late 2000s was computational power and data, and that significantly improved AI's ability to represent complex signals, such as images, and thereby you see, in this case, this breakthrough in image recognition. So AlexNet is a convolutional neural net. Before 2012, image recognition, computer vision was actually pretty bad. And you see in 2012, starting with AlexNet, a significant decrease in the error that computers have in recognizing images. And that is, AlexNet is kind of the foundation for just about every computer vision architecture algorithm that you see, from your phone tagging to Tesla's HydraNet. Its foundation is AlexNet. And we are going to actually use that to represent these artworks. So the specific architecture, I have used this in one of my published papers. I'm also going to use this here in this project. So what does it do? And what is that CNN doing? It's basically taking an image, which is kind of a set of inputs, a pixel values, and then taking those raw pixel values and transforming them through layers of these neural nets. So each box represents a layer here. And then it spits out another sort of list of numbers, another list of features or vectors to represent that image. And so this is another representation of saying that we take an image, pass it and through this neural net and create a vector representation of it. And what it is doing, those vectors basically represent each will represent a dimension in this very simplified diagram, and it'll be 3 dimensions, and each picture will be positioned somewhere along those 3-dimensional space corresponding to the values of that vector. So this is what the neural net is doing. It's obvious we don't use a 3-dimensional vector, it's a 4,000-dimensional vector. And that's an important aspect. A high-dimensional representation brings with it a much richer and better representation and avoids the problems that computer vision has in some sense had in the past. And our proposition, as I said, is so we take this space of vectors. Now we can pin down an ideal based on these vector representation. And we say that the closer you come to this ideal in this space, the more the artist's attention is going to be. So in other words, the other way to say is the higher the distinctiveness. So the more distinct you're from this ideal, the lower the attention a producer is going to receive in this space. The context in which we apply this actual is early 20th century modern artists. Many of you recognize these artists. You have Vasily Kandinsky, Kazimir Malevich, and Vanessa Bell. So three of the big, among the many pioneers of modern art. And I'll show you results in two samples. So the first one is the set of 82 abstract artists, and we look at over 7,000 works created by these artists. And the sample was selected by the curatorial team at the Museum of Modern Art based on who they saw as instrumental to the development of abstraction. And the dependent variable we are looking at is attention, which comes from the Google Ngram corpus, which has the advantage of attention in printed media in a large corpus across multiple languages and over a very long set of time period, and also very different kinds of media. So here is an example. So if you search for the artist František Kupka, who is a Czech artist, you will see there's lots of different kinds. There's books, there are journals, there are also newspapers that this corpus allows us to track. And the independent variable, again, is, as I said, these two forms of distinctiveness from the ideal. One is how far you're from your community of peers, and how the other is how far or how distinct you are from this Platonic center, which is represented by the average of your peers' work. So here is basically, again, that representation. What we do is first we take each image, create a vector representation of them, and then what we do to get the measure of these distinctiveness, the peer distinctiveness is basically the pairwise cosine distance from of each work from the artist's peers. And the distinctiveness from the center is basically we take all the artist's peers' work, average them. That is the center at any given time in the data. And the distinctiveness from the center is basically the cosine distance from that center. So just to give you some examples from our data, this is the artist František Kupka's work distinctiveness, which is among actually the highest. It is the furthest. In 1912, it is among the artists, he is the furthest from his peers, this particular work. And actually, this is, in some sense, interesting because art historians saw Kupka more than Picasso, more than Braque, as making a very pure break from abstraction. And it's not surprising that before abstraction, there was representational art. So Kupka, whose work makes this very pure break, is unsurprisingly much further away from his peers in 1912. This is how the distinctiveness of the famous black square by Kazimir Malevich over time. So in 1920, it has a distinctiveness score of around 0.85. It is pretty further away from his peers. But what's also interesting is as his peers emulate him or imitate him, you see that the black square or Kazimir Malevich becomes less distinctive. He's becoming closer to his peers. So which allows the advantage of using this method is to capture the dynamism of what is a creative work, how new or how different it is as the artist's own work is evolving and also their peers' work is evolving over time. So we also validated this, whether this perception of how different an artist's work is from their peers actually maps out human perception. And that is supposed to be the big advantage of using neural nets here in this research. And we did a systematic survey asking people to give them their perception of how different artworks are and how different these CNN-based measures of differences are. And the CNN-based measure actually agrees with the human consensus slightly more than actually any average human being does. But the differences are not, I think, that different, but it sort of, again, confirms what we suspected, that this AI-generated representation and inducing a measure of distinctiveness from that actually maps on very well to how human beings perceive differences between these artworks. So this is the distribution of the peers' distinctiveness. It follows a normal distribution. This is distinctiveness from that center, from that Platonic center. It has a wider distribution, but again, it follows this normal distribution. And this is the attention. So like a lot of rewards in most creative industries, it's very much a winner-take-all phenomena where most people have very little or no attention and a few people have a lot. So it's a highly skewed distribution. And remember, our proposition is to test this negative relationship between attention and distinctiveness. So the further you're going to be from the ideal, the less attention you're going to actually get. And this is just simply in the first sample, the econometric method we used. It's a fixed panel data setup. And so I'll draw your attention to the main variable. We use certain control variables such as the artist's productivity, length of career, and the artist's fixed effects are there in the model. And what's important is what I highlight is the peer distinctiveness, the negative sign there, which shows that the further you're getting from your peers, the less attention you're getting. It's actually a significant, as you go from the 10th to the 90th percentile, the attention an artist is going to get is going to drop very meaningfully.
Given where we are on the time, can you jump ahead to some of the conclusion slides?
Sure. So I had a lot more. So the upshot of this sort of research here is that you actually see in both samples that we use is how artists, that you actually can derive an ordering of these very highly heterogeneous based set of works based on just the work themselves. So how we can understand how attention is encoded in the work. It does allow us to quantify something like an ideal in a field that's very subjective. And the implications of this is now you can actually, for creative producers, you can actually create work that will, in some sense, maximize your position in an ordering. And we can discuss what the implications of such an automation there are, but I would submit that the real sort of innovation is going to happen in being able to curate that corpus of peers' work to actually determine the work that you want to create that will maximize whatever form of reward that an artist might want to do. So with that, I am going to stop here. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mitali. I'm sorry for interrupting. We unfortunately need to move on. But this is exciting, and we need to get more of this. So let's try to keep moving so we can come back around to it, I hope. I want to pass the mic over to Nandini now, if she's ready to go, and we can have our second paper.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone, and I'm really excited to be here this morning. Thank you, and let me share my screen. Yes.
All right, go for it.
Again, I'm Nandini Giri, and I'm an assistant professor of human-computer interaction. I was a student at Indiana University, and now I'm a professor at Purdue. I direct the Experience Realities Lab, and today I'd like to show you a snapshot of an ongoing research project that I'm working along with my students in my lab, but also I have a course that I offer for grad students where we are prototyping futuristic applications and use cases in the metaverse using some of the speculative tools that are provided to HCI researchers in the field, the human-computer interaction. So today what I'm going to present is more kind of a thought exercise. It's an ideation into looking into this novelty of the AI technologies, like what are the potentials that this technology can afford, especially in online museums and gallery spaces? Has it been fully explored? And then using some of the tools to kind of foresee into the future, maybe like 5 years from now, 3 years from now, and seeing how these technologies, like as they open up, what are some ways that we as technology designers can bring up or ideate some use cases and discuss about its implications, thinking about how is this improving audience engagement, or what are some ways that AI technology, like for all the threats and the huge insecurity that's creating among these artists, how are ways that we can actually use them in a way that can be of benefit to us. So to start off, usually in a forecasting exercise, what we do both in my class and in my research lab is that we talk about what are the current trends, like what is happening right now with these emerging technologies. So in this context, we are looking into AI technologies and really studying the museum space and galleries. So how is AI technology being used currently? And the research reviews and also some of the current examples, projects going on shown that AI has been adopted in the space since 2010 and or even before. And it's been mainly being used for generating metadata, being able to tag museum collections, being able to generate information about the different artifacts. But then the authors and the researchers, they also warn about the kind of authenticity of this data, especially when it's coming to culturally sensitive information. Then comes computer vision for collecting data, information, machine learning for visitor data. So accuracy is something that's been questioned in the current use of this technology, but there's also the potential that researchers point towards of how data about people visiting museums, online museums, ways of tracking their social media comments, and then developing insights about what is it that they liked in the museum, and then finding ways to really track and group different audiences based on their engagement patterns. Is there a way to look into museum collections and be able to sort it out in multiple categories that are more user-centered and user-preferred? Voice assistants and conversational agents. So museum tours with audio on demand, they can really enhance our experiences. And then, of course, comes chatbots and gamified platforms. There are projects where teens are able to download apps in their mobile phone and just explore physical museums. There are chatbots that can be companions or virtual kind of these tour guides that can take people around museums. And as students, like teens, gamification is a really nice way for learning objectives. So finding ways to maybe like a Pokemon game in the museum where they go around collecting different souvenirs and then being able to both learn but also engage in a more fun and playful manner with these different artifacts. And of course, the generative AI artwork and human perception about art. So what I'm doing here is really like doing a wide net kind of looking into like what are the trends, what is going on right now, what are researchers like studying, what are their main interests in the space. And so now that we have kind of a collection of the different trends, the different applications, the next step is in really looking into some of the different futuristic scenarios. And this is where we use like the Boros future cone in being able to project the current trends of these technologies and looking into different futures, like what is a desirable future 5 years from now? Let's pull it further, zoom it out 10 years from now. How are the applications shaping up in the future? And then as researchers or designers in the space, we ask questions, so what are the implications? So I would like to just move to like the central piece here. Me and a couple of my students, we had 3 different scenarios that we call it design fiction. So kind of developing narratives that is a little bit futuristic, like not too long because it's hard to predict. But this is within the context of a high school where our participant or our user, Amy, is logging into a high school metaverse and enrolls in an art history class. Then her tutor chat box takes her to a virtual museum, just a moment, where she's assigned specific tasks. She's able to earn course credits for interacting with the curated artwork and collect digital souvenirs. So this is kind of one of the scenarios or fictions that we created. And in the next slide, I'm showing you an agency plot. This is based on Professor Eric Stolterman's work, looking into the elements of interaction. So what are different lenses that we can use to evaluate some of these ideas? So even before developers can start implementing these applications, we as user designers are able to study our ideas, the scenarios, but also looking at it from different lenses to be able to evaluate it. So for the fiction or the narrative that I just presented, what you see here is some of our own kind of plotting of what is the agency of the user in the previous scenario, especially when a school student, a high school student, uses a metaverse to be able to connect to a local museum and be able to learn about art history. So this is something where it's pre-designed, so the agency is low, independence is low because she's going through a 101 class. It's really about the receptivity in being able to learn more about the art history through interaction. So it's a really choreographed experience for this user. The interaction mode is, of course, having a virtual chatbot, being able to guide her through the whole experience. So this is like a scenario that we see that could be a possible future of using these online museums that is AI powered, that can improve a student's learning experience. Next, we move on to another use case, a scenario where Amy is again able to log into the metaverse and this time being able to socialize with her friends in an online anime club. So now this becomes a space of exploration where she can use generative tools to be able to create her own digital short films using her favorite characters. So in this way, she leaves the museum with good memories and personalized artifacts. So this is our second scenario. And again, like we did the exercise of going through asking, is there agency? Like in this case, there's going to be a very high level of agency, a lot of independence. She has the tools to be able to create work, but also be able to collaborate with her friends. So there's a lot of freedom of action, and there's a lot of awareness level in what she's interacting with. And finally, we move on to a third scenario where this is more of a personal space. So we are kind of experimenting with different modes of interaction and the kind of experiences that people can have in this futuristic use cases. So here we have a contemplative life coach chat box, and this is really about the student, the high school student, creating her own rich space in this online world using these tools, being able to explore the tangibles and the intangibles. And this is kind of the exercise we did in terms of what are the different levels of agency. It's really a balancing act in this third scenario. So I think I have a few more minutes, but to kind of conclude, like what is going on here is we are yet to develop any applications, but this is really more of a thought exercise and activity in looking at how AI technologies in its current state can kind of lead into different futuristic scenarios. And given our first investigation into how these different design choices can lead to different user experience, has taught us some good information. And moving ahead, we'd like to create more prototypes and test it out with real user data to be able to actually see like what are things that people enjoy and how this idea can be taken further into workable realities. So with that, I will stop here and I will wait for your questions later.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for coming back the next day for solving your tech problems. I love it. It was a great talk, and it's a great contrast with the first one. They both are rich with lots of really good material. There's a good conversation happening in the chat, so tune in. You'll be able to see some questions popping up there for you, I'm sure. And I want to turn the mic over to Annie Tubaji, who's zooming in all the way from Swansea. Good afternoon, Annie. I wish we had more time for all this. We're going to race into it. Please take it away.
Hello there, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to be again with you. You're a great crowd. I hope you see my slides.
Yep, we've got the slides.
Right. So in the interest of time, I will shorten my presentation. I'll try just to carry the main message to you. I'm Manitu Baji. I'm a cultural and regional economist. So what is a cultural economist? Economists are interested in the behavior of people. And the cultural economist is interested in the impact of culture on the behavior of people. So you all know that this artificial intelligence wave all started with the creation of the autonomous, the creation of this artificial human behavior. And the question that I ask in this research and in a series of other papers is there actually a cultural difference in terms of the product that has been created by a human and an identical otherwise product created by an artificial intelligence? You see, so if you have a chair created in UK and a chair created in the US, we think of them in terms of cultural difference. So if the chair is created in the world of humans and the chair is created in the world of AI, is there a cultural difference still in the mind of the user? This is the question that I'm interested in, the big research question. And previous research has shown that people seem to respond to the information that something is created by a human and not by an AI and vice versa in a very important manner. There is evaluation of the importance of being human. Once they learn that the product is actually not created by people, they push down the re-evaluation of this same product. So previously they said they liked it. The moment they understand it is not a human product, they push the re-evaluation down. The same person doesn't push the re-evaluation down if he thinks it is a human product he is re-evaluating. This has been shown in research related to the provision of services in the banks. It has been done in comparison of work of music. If a composition is written by a human, the re-evaluation stays up. If a composition is written by an AI, the moment that the listener is informed that it's an AI composition, they push it down. So in this paper, we wanted to use the most creative and the most advanced human art product, the one that combines language and art, so poetry. Why? Because music, for instance, something old. It has been with us and so on for since we existed as species almost. But language developed at the very latest stages of our evolution. So it should be the most intellectual of our art products, so to speak. So we wanted to take this quintessential art form, which also now the artificial intelligence is capable of when we have the large language models, right? So we asked artificial intelligence to compose poetry, and we asked human poets to compose poetry. And then we offered these pieces of poetry to readers. We asked them to evaluate them, and we asked them to re-evaluate them. But before the re-evaluation, we gave them information that who is the poet, whether it's a human or an AI. So this creates a very neat methodological setting of a difference in differences. You have evaluation and re-evaluation after the treatment of an information provision, whether the poet is human or AI. This has been done also in the previous cases, but now we introduce three additional hypotheses. The one is asking whether the people were able to guess the nature of the poet, human or AI, before we give them the information. So we first ask them to evaluate the poetry, then we ask them to guess whether the poet was human or AI, and only then we tell them the truth, and then we ask them for re-evaluation. Also introduced one more complexity in the design of the survey that we made. So this is all an online survey where we integrate this poetry, and then we ask people to engage with it. We introduced a question how emotional they find the poem. whether they're touched emotionally by it. And then we ask them to donate for the plantation of a tree. All the poems are on ecological topic, and the prompt to the AI and to the human poets was to try to stir emotions and provoke pro-ecological activity. So we want to see whether the AI and the human are first recognizable for the reader, and also whether they can touch the emotions of the reader in the same way, and whether they can prompt the reader in the same way towards action. Why? Because from practical point of view, we will use this artificial intelligence to generate content for marketing, to generate content for information and for promotion of a certain kind of activities. So if a person hears prompt and the promotion created by a human, will he respond to this better than to the incentivization by an AI? Why? Because we know that AI are still not as developed in the emotional side. Right? They're not compassionate. Some people are working on these versions of AI, but they're not as developed as the rational AI machines. So simply put, AI machines can play chess, but they cannot really understand sarcasm that well and cannot engage emotionally with compassion to the person on the other side. And also there is, for the decision of the person, there is something else. Even if it turns out that the artificial intelligence can emotionalize people more, we know from, as I mentioned in the chat, George Shackle and other behavioral economists, we know that actually people, and this is very much speaking with the first presentation, people actually do not know to be too much surprised. They like some novelty, but up to a certain point, and beyond it, they shrink away from what's novel. So there's some kind of a turning point there. So we want to see whether the human innovation, because of being actually smaller than the innovation that the AI is able to do, the humans actually can prompt other humans towards decisions much more successfully than the AI. The AI will be very fanciful, very new, but because it's very new, it will be slightly frightening. This is the underlying motivation of this last hypothesis. And so in all the 4 cases, we'll use indifferences because of the way we ask the questions. And I don't know whether I'll have enough time to show you all the details. Let me tell you what we found for each hypothesis. So we confirmed the importance of being human. So people do push up the evaluation of human poetry and push down the reevaluation of AI poetry once they realize who is the poet. However, they are really unable to distinguish what's AI and what's human. It's like 50% of the time they're mistaking the human for AI and vice versa. In terms of emotion, they do find the emotion of the emotionality of the poetry of the AI stronger than the one by humans, but they always they step back from their initial intention to donate money when you keep pressing them, and when they understand that you want to manipulate them by offering them poetry. But this shrinking is smaller when the poetry is written by a human, and this is not an effect driven by the information that the poem is human. In other words, it is the original effect from the quality of the poetry. The human poetry less often repels the reader from giving the same donation as he gave before. So they always do not like being manipulated by poetry or by anything towards giving more money, but they're less sensitive to this when the poem is written by a human. This is the thing. So the poetry that we made is haiku, because haiku is very short. It's having a very particular structure. So technically, it will be very comparable what will come from a human and what will come from an AI. But if there is better emotionality in people, they will choose the words, not technically the ones which are most often used, but they will be innovative enough in order to touch the humans qualitatively in a different way than the machine will do. It will have a different rationale in the way that they'll choose the quality of what they're putting in, not the structure.
So Annie, can you jump to the end? We're out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah. So then we have the difference in differences all across the different estimations. And as I said, the importance of being human, so whether the haiku is human, has had an impact on the behavior of people, and their negative response to being manipulated with poetry is less sensitive when the poem is human. So they take human poetry and human manipulation easier, so to speak. So this is my very shrunk presentation. I hope you made sense of it, and if not, you can ask me questions to clarify.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Annie. I'm giving an actual round of applause to our speakers. We can hopefully get a virtual one on the web. I appreciate us being able to squeeze in 3 presentations in a slot. We only had 2 for us, so thanks to the speakers. I apologize for being heavy and interrupting. But we will have time in the chat and throughout the rest of the morning for more conversations and discussion on this. But I want to stay on schedule as much as we can, in part because we're having some other guests coming in now, or in 3 minutes for an AI workout. So let's take a quick pause. Anyone can go use the restroom, and we will be back at 10:20 for the AI workout session. Thank you all. Okay, my clock says it's 10:20. So welcoming people back as they settle back in from a very truncated break, but hopefully had a chance to stretch your legs and return for this next short session here, which we've got listed on the program as an AI workout. This is a chance for us to see a demonstration and a short presentation by our great guests from Indiana University, Indianapolis, Jason Palomara and Timothy Hsu. I haven't met yet, but they're my colleagues across campus. And in a virtual world, this is how we meet. We just do it digitally. So it's a pleasure to meet you both. Thank you for joining us for this. And I want to turn it over to you guys and let you wow us.
Hello, I am Jason Palomara. Also with me is Timothy Hsu, who is my colleague in the Department of Music and Arts Technology at the Heron School of Art and Design. I'm going to share my screen here. Second. Because I'm playing music. Okay, should be good. Everybody, I'm assuming everyone will see that. If not, somebody give me a shout.
We got it.
Okay, good. And if I don't start from the first slide, my colleague Tim will yell at me. So our project here is evaluating an AI generated music with a musical Turing test. So this is something that I've been doing for the past few years. So I've got this class called Autonomous Music Systems. It's an undergraduate and graduate class. I've been doing it for about 3 years. It's an introduction to music and artificial intelligence. It's been a really fun experience trying to get the students engaging with this kind of research. And we every year we get a little bit deeper and we get further into experimenting with these technologies. And I always like to tell people this anecdote, and that is that, like, every year I teach this class, there is something that at the beginning of the class everybody says, this is about 5 years off. And then at some point in the class, there's something, somebody says, oh, you said this was 5 years off, but somebody just did it. So it's always this, like, oh, okay, well, I would have completely revised the lesson plan if I had known that existed. It's moving so quickly. It's hard to stay on top of it, as many of you probably know. So we start from the ground up. There's no assumption that any students in the class know anything about machine learning. In many respects, we have to sort of start from the beginning of working with coding. We use Max MSP. We also dabble in some things like Python, and there's a little MATLAB thrown in here and there. Some other things, but basically using these tools to understand machine learning. And then as the class goes forward, we get into music information retrieval and more interactive things that we can do. So there's 3 main projects in the class. The students have to design their own bots that use machine learning in some way. We also make our own data sets. We start the class by using data sets that are available online, and then we quickly shift into making our own. So there's a showcase that we do at the end of the semester called the AI Music Experiments event, or AMI. So this is just a showcase of everything going on in the department with AI, music and machine learning, music information retrieval. There's embodied AI, holographic AI, anything we can do AI focused and involving music, we throw it in on this concert, with a special focus on doing things live, not so much like just sort of static experiments, but things that actually like interact with musicians in some way. So there's a thing that we've been doing from the beginning, which we was always sort of a dream of mine, to do a live reverse musical Turing test. So the department has a Yamaha disc clavier, which, if you don't know the Yamaha disc clavier, I'll play I'll play something here. This is an example of the Yamaha disc. So it's basically a programmable piano. Did everybody hear that? I'm assuming I can't see you anymore, but
Yes, we heard it. It's
okay,
fine.
good. Thank you. Yeah, so so it's a programmable piano. So you can use it like a player piano. So I'm not sure what most people do with this. I think it usually ends up in most situations, a disc clavier ends up being like a like background music when you don't have a piano player. But most of what our department does with it is these sort of like AI and machine learning experiments. So we've used it for this live musical Turing test. So the way we set up the test is these pieces that we use for this are usually generated in the first half of the semester, because the rest of the semester we have to plan the concert. So I need the pieces pretty early. So this is usually involving Max MSP, sometimes Magenta, because that's where we usually are in the semester. So these pieces, because it's very difficult to write pieces as if they are for human beings to play, as if they would be playable by humans. These are specifically written for the disc clavier as a performer, not for humans. So when we do the Turing test, I have to tell people, it's if you say something like this piece couldn't have been written by an AI because it's involving 12 notes at a time or something like that. That's not really valid. We're actually because it would take too long basically for us to go into that in the class, to actually instrument or arrange the pieces for a specific human capacity, like having 10 fingers or something like that. So so these pieces are specifically for the disc clavier, not for human performers. They have to be 1 to 2 minutes long. So in the past few years, the first years that we did it, I used music of my own. So music of my own, I essentially used some pieces that I wrote back when I was an undergrad, and I threw those in, and just to kind of like get this whole thing going, we would use different data sets. The students would each pick their own data set. Some of them use pop music, some of them use some classical music, whatever it is. And then they would all, sort of like build it, to different specs. And in that sense, since I was using music that I wrote that I did not know that I was involving in a Turing test later, the human composer was not in the know. I was just a human writing human music. So this past year in 2023, we did it a different way. We used one data set. We actually engaged a guest composer who's my friend and colleague Dr. Robin Cox. We asked him to actually write 2 pieces specifically for the disc clavier. So and we also used, as the data set, we used just his music. So there was no other examples in the data set. So at this point, I'm going to just play a couple pieces, and perhaps you could just write in the comments whether you think that this is a human composed piece or an AI. And here it is. And as cool as that is, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop it there. And here's sample number 2. That seems to be a good spot to end it. And Dr. Sue, hopefully you've been watching the comments. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sue to discuss the results that we.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. It looks like some people have said AI for the first one and human for the second one. But just real quick, I know we're running short on time, but we did a survey at the end of this class for all 15 pieces, 13 of which were computer generated, 2 were human. And it was at the end of this concert, at the concert, so people came in and out of the concert. So our end varied between 18 and 27 people, depending on when they were in the concert. Jason, next slide, please. We asked them basically 4 questions. They had 4 simple questions. Was it AI or human? Kind of like what we just asked you. How confident were they in their response? Why did they think? Why did they answer that way? What made them think it was AI? What made them think it was human? And we just generally asked if they liked the piece or not. And we asked some general demographic questions as well. Next slide. So we aggregate all the results, and of the AI pieces, 69% of the people said 69% of the respondents thought it was AI, and 31% thought it was human. So all the AI pieces put together, this is the average response rate. That about 70% thought the AI pieces were AI. And interestingly, for the human pieces, it was almost the same. 62.5% thought it was AI driven, and 37.5 thought it was human composed. So there's really, we did some statistics. There's no statistical significance difference between these 2 results. That the audience members who participated in this class project basically said they couldn't tell the difference as a whole between AI and human pieces. Interestingly enough, I think there's no piece that actually had a majority human responses. So human as an answer. So there might be a little bit of limitation to study people thinking it's going to be AI just because it's kind of just primed into their kind of system. Next slide, please. Some overall takeaways, like I said, no piece had a majority responses that were human composed. When we looked at the confidence levels of people choosing AI or human, generally, most people were more confident that it was something that was AI than it was human composed. And then we'll get there. We gotta get through some math first. I know the suspense. No, 2 human pieces were not chosen as human pieces. We ran a couple statistical tests. And next slide. One of the tests we ran was the binomial test. Basically, we looked at was the proportion of responses greater than like chance of 50-50%. So all these were chosen to be AI. The ones that everybody chose AI as all of these. So they were correct in bipolar universe all around. These 5-6 pieces that to the 5% of significance level, that they were all correctly chosen as AI. Interestingly enough, the 2 that were human composed, orange goat, the 5th one, and then clown car on the right side, those were human composed, and they were not statistically significantly anything. In fact, the results were pretty even across both of those. So the humans did not choose the human proposed piece as humans. Next slide, please. And then quality results, mostly we have a little more work to do with this in future results, but most people thought that things were AI because they were fast, too many notes playing at once, like 17, 18 notes played at once, and we only have 10 fingers, kind of what Jason was saying before. Most people thought that the fact that it was kind of aesthetically displeasing was a reason why it was AI, that no human could write something so quote ugly. It was way too complex for something to come out of a human brain, that it must have been AI. So these are some of the biases that we see that the humans have to think whether or not it was human or AI.
Yeah, and if I could break in there, I think also this kind of like leads me to believe that this might have a lot to do with the idea that people just don't know this kind of music that Dr. Cox produces. And it could also be just that in some ways he was kind of composing to maybe skew the results. I'm not sure. It's hard to say.
And we're running out of time, so next slide.
Sure.
Jason.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So the two samples you chose, Jason, do you want to reveal the answer?
I will reveal the answer.
Conclude our presentation.
Sample 1 was written by a human, and sample 2 was written by a bot. So how did you do?
So the first one was human, second one was by, I think the initial answers were backwards. I think some of the initial answers that the first one was AI, second was human.
Joanne, you were
got it
right.
right though.
Good job.
So our next step is we're going to deploy this to a wider audience. We're going to assemble more of these pieces and have an online survey that will have a larger sample size and go from there. And someone questioned if the human knew it was emulating AI derived music, how much does the test reveal? We're going to also expand our human data set in these going forward. So I think it's someone made a comment about Liszt. Yeah, well, Liszt, I think he made a deal with the devil, so to make really hard music. So I don't know if he counts. I'm a pianist myself. This music is really hard. So thank you. Jason, do you have any final comments?
Thank you very much. I put our information up on the screen. Reach out to us if you're curious about any of this. And I'm always looking for people to be involved in this concert series. So if anybody's got an idea or is interested in something, collaborating in some way, let me know.
Thank you, Jason and Tim. That was wonderful. I appreciate you guys rushing through that for us, and I think it was a great experience for all of us. So thank you all. Take a look at the chat. There's comments, questions. It got some good juices flowing, and we are going to come back here in 3 minutes for our keynoter. We'll have Lyndon Walcott-Burton joining us in just a few minutes.
Thank you, everyone.
Wow, that break went fast. My clock shows that we are at the 10:40 mark and then some, and ready to go on to the next part of our program. So welcome everybody back. I'm glad you're sticking with us. And we're at perhaps my favorite moment of the morning and afternoon for Lyndon. Welcome from London. I hope you're doing well. I'm glad you could join us. When we started this call for papers and our intent to put together the symposium on arts and arts engagement in an AI world, Lyndon Walcott-Burton reached out to me and said he's put together some interesting material, and he was not underselling it. I looked at it; it was absolutely amazing. It was wonderful. The comprehensiveness and quality of what he's done to put together this compilation of the kinds of ways we sing artificial in the creative industries was remarkable, and I was thrilled that he agreed to accept our invitation to keynote our talk at the symposium, because I think it's a great sort of tour de force of what's going on out there. He's given this talk around the world, and now he brings it to the States and can talk to us. And so without any further ado, I want to, one other bit of ado. I want to first encourage everyone to go click on the link to see more on his background. And then I also want to tell people that, like we did yesterday, we're going to try to get an AI to help impersonate Lyndon or answer some questions from the audience, and we can compare to see how well AI is doing at sort of simulating expertise in the matter. But without any more delay, I want to pass this over to Lyndon Walcott-Burton. Thank you so much for joining us. Please take it away.
Pleasure. Thank you. And can I just check that you can all hear me okay?
You're great.
Real wonderful. Thank you. So, yep, as Doug said, I'm Lyndon Walcott-Burton. I'm from the Greater London Authority, so I work for the Mayor of London. A little bit of a quick background for this is that last year, the Deputy Mayor for Culture asked me to look into the impact of AI to the creative industries. At the time, it was just, a small thing because they were curious to look into. But then from that came this presentation / resource pack. And since then, as Doug says, I've been all over the world with it. I've delivered it 20 plus times and been on 15 panels. I was on a panel this morning for music at Google. So this is the full works that you'll get. I won't say much more than that because I think it speaks for itself, but it should take about 50 minutes and then 45, 50, and then I'll open for questions at the end of it. So to jump in, artificial intelligence in the creative industries, there are a few things we'll be covering. The first is we'll be looking at how machine learning works, because that'll inform a lot of the examples that you'll see throughout. Then we'll have an exploration of chatbots and ChatGPT. Then an overview of the impact of 7 different sectors in the creative industries. And then a brief look at copyright as well and how that impacts on this conversation. So to start, there are 2 core uses of AI in the creative industries. The first is with big data, and the second is with generative AI. So with big data, AI is really good when it comes to data analysis. I worked in the civil service in the UK for a couple of years, and I worked on COVID response. And there was a time when they had an AI system and they gave it all of the medical records of everybody in the country. And that AI system could analyze people's records and tell who was vulnerable to COVID based on who had had it before. There's no way that any human being would be able to analyze a data set like that. So like I say, AI is really good when it comes to data analysis. And the second is generative AI. So generative AI is when AI can generate new pieces of content. That can be text, images, video, and you'll see examples of those as we go through. But it's generative AI, which is why AI has come back in the news recently, because AI has been around for a long time, but it's the Gen AI stuff that has hit the headlines. So quick talk about machine learning. There are different types of terminology for this, but for sheer simplicity, we're going to call it machine learning for now. So if you imagine all of the books in the world, if you imagine Wikipedia, newspaper articles, if you were to feed all of those into an AI system, essentially what you would have is like an AI brain. So you'd have all of the knowledge and information from those sources. That is what we call a training data set. And in short, that's how something like ChatGPT works. They're a bit more complicated than that, but at its simplest, that's how they work. But that also applies to creative works. So if you were to take all of the works of Pablo Picasso and feed those into an AI system, it could learn the style of Pablo Picasso and then generate a new piece of content in the style of Pablo Picasso. Now we're going to put this idea to the test. I saw in the talk before that you had a test when it came to music. Now you're going to have one when it comes to images. So there are 6 images that are going to show up on your screen. One of them is going to be the AI generated. 5 of them is going, and 1 is going to be an AI generated image, and 5 of them are going to be real people. So put in the chat which one you think is the AI generated image. So in the chat, put the one that you think is the AI generated image. Okay, we've got some 3s, 5. Okay, we seem to have a mix. We seem to have a fair mix. All right, so we're going to go to the answer. The answer is number 2. So number 2 is the AI generated image. So just like we saw before, the way this works is that they're trained on millions to billions of people's images, and then it can generate a new image based on what you've trained it on. But that also applies to people's voices. So similarly, you can train it on somebody's voice and then have that person's voice be replicated as well, such as in this. And let me know if you can't hear this, because I think you can, but let me know if you can't hear it.
It very clearly just straight up sounds like Joe Biden, who is the current president of the United States. Now use Joe Biden's voice here to explain to you what this piece of voice.
Well, could you all hear it? Thumbs up, cool, wonderful. And we'll do a second one.
Sure, type deal. So yeah, I don't really know much about this one, but this is like a woman pop star.
And finally, we have Rick Sanchez. I haven't tested this one out at all, so we're gonna see if this one sounds any good. I have no idea what this sounds like. I have no idea if this actually sounds anything close to Rick from the show Rick and Morty.
And it does. And just so you can get a proper flavor, this is the real person's voice. Oh. Back it on.
Okay, so now, folks, finally, you're listening to my real legit voice for once in this entire video. You guys haven't heard my voice at all so far.
Yeah, and that's all being done in real time. And this is just a YouTuber, so he's speaking and it's automatically being translated into his voice. So then that brings us to something like ChatGPT. So we've seen how that works. And I think most people by now would have seen examples of ChatGPT or used it to some degree. But I'm going to go through some examples as if, let's say, if we're a marketing person within the creative industries. So what I'm going to do is I have a brochure from an arts organization in London, and that has shows, I'll show you a clip of it shortly. It has the productions for that theatre over the next year. And we're going to ask ChatGPT to do a few things to this brochure. So the first question that we have for it is, could you provide a general critique of this copy? What are its strengths and weaknesses? And then we're going to ask it, can you tell me how accessible this is for different types of audiences and provide suggestions for improvement? And just to show you the brochure so you have an idea of what it's like, this is it here. And if we just look at this page, you can get a flavor of it. So quite text heavy, quite black and white. I can't see how many pages there are on this because things are in the way, but I think there's about 30 pages to it. So what I would do is I'll go over to ChatGPT. I've already uploaded the document into it. It takes about a few seconds. And then I'm going to ask it again, can you provide a general critique of this copy? What are its strengths and weaknesses? Give them to me in a list, all right? And we'll hit go. And here we go, strengths, engaging introduction, starts with warm and inviting greeting from the CEO and artistic director, comprehensive content, accessibility, information, diverse programming, visual appeal, so you can see the strengths listed there. And then on the weaknesses, length and density, we could see ourselves within a few seconds is quite lengthy, which I can read as well. Dense blocks of text, you get the idea. There's no way that any of us could read that document in that space of time and do the same thing, right? But that can do it within seconds. So the next one, can you tell me how accessible this is for different types of audiences? Can you also break it down by access need? And let's see what it says. And here we go. So we have it for visual impairments, strengths, readable layout, contrast and font size, image descriptions as a weakness, complex layouts, with suggestions for improvement as well. Also talks about hearing impairments too. And again, the weaknesses, strengths, suggestions for improvement, cognitive learning disabilities. You get the idea. So again, this done it in seconds, right? This is with our marketing hat on. A few more things we're going to ask it to do just for sight. So as I mentioned, there are productions in the brochure, and we're going to ask it now to write 5 tweets for one of the productions in the brochure, yeah? So there we go. One of the productions in it is called A Strange Loop. As you can see, we have our tweets. And then let's do one more. We're not going to do that one because of time. Write a blog post advertising one of the shows. And here we go. Here we get a blog post on it as well. But, you know, we're doing a presentation. I don't want you to read all of that. So I'm going to ask it, can you write it now in 200 words, please? Because it's good to be polite, right? And here we go. There we are. Now, I don't know for sure if that's 200 words. I could check, but I'm not going to for time. But you get the idea, right? So if you are working in marketing, then, you know, that automatically can speed up your process, right? And not just in the creative industries, but anywhere. And it's not that you need to take the content and copy and paste it and run with it. You can take it, tweak it, change it. It can be a first draft. Again, it's there as a support system for you. Now, there are a few more things to say when it comes to these systems. Chatbots can be good for a lot of things, generating ideas really quickly, summarizing articles, funding applications. Anyone who is, you know, is a grant maker or gives funding will definitely have to consider this technology now and whether people can use them or not. Marketing, as we saw, and also homework assignments, which many students are now using these things for. So one is that bots do not have a conscious mind, so they cannot actively think, all right? They're not about to take over your life or your phone. And the way to think of them is like an extremely advanced autocorrect. A few more things I'll say on chatbots before we move on. One is that ChatGPT now have a new thing where you can create custom versions of chatbots. So you could have your own chatbot built for your organization without knowing how to code yourself. And that can be for internal use, external use, whatever you choose. Also, one of the concerns that came with these chatbots was data security. People were worried that if they put their information in, what happens to it? Is it going to be used? So on and so forth. They have an enterprise model now. When I say they, I mean things like ChatGPT, Bard, Gemini, all of these big companies. And their enterprise models work in that they don't train their systems on the data that you input, which is one of the main concerns for a lot of these organizations. And they also have access to the higher versions of ChatGPT. So moving on now, we're going to look at a section which I label, will AI take my job? Which is one of the big questions that comes up when it comes to the AI conversation. The first thing to say when it comes to the creative industries for this is that not all jobs in the creative industries are creative. It's so easy to automatically think of the actors, the writers, the musicians, but actually, as you see, there are loads of work, lots of jobs in the creative industries that aren't creative. This was from a report by OpenAI last year. So OpenAI make ChatGPT, and this looks at what makes your job exposed to chatbot technology. So this is specifically on chatbot technology, so not AI generally, specifically on chatbots. The ones that I put in red are the ones which are within the creative industries. So low exposure would be low wages, jobs requiring low formal education, and you can see. And the jobs that would be highly exposed to this technology, as you can see in the right, high wages, writing, programming, information processing. A lot of these roles actually are jobs which we thought previously would be immune to artificial intelligence. But now, because of the developments, they're actually exposed to this tech. Then they looked at what type of jobs are exposed to this technology. And again, I've highlighted the ones in red, which are kind of fundamental to the creative sector. Interpreters and translators, you definitely see examples of as we go through, survey researchers, writers and authors we've just looked at, proofreaders towards the bottom as well. And once again, these are roles that previously we would have thought would be pretty immune to AI. Moving on, this is from a report by Goldman Sachs, which came out last year, which looks at the impact of AI to the whole of the economy, to different sectors in the economy. The one in the middle here, which is highlighted, is the creative sector. So the dark blue is what they expect can't be automated within that sector. The light blue is what they anticipate will be complemented by AI. And then the dark gray slither at the top is what they think would likely be fully replaced by artificial intelligence. Now, as you can see, even though there's not a huge amount which they expect to be fully replaced, there's a huge chunk there which could be complemented by artificial intelligence, which means there's actually quite a lot within the creative industries which could or would be impacted by this tech. But if we expand that out, as I said, there are other sectors that support the creative industries as well. If we look at office and admin support, legal, and then business and financial operations, you'll see there are huge chunks, especially in office and in legal, huge chunks which should be expected to be fully replaced, and a large chunk which should be complemented by it. So the idea now that the creative industries won't be impacted by this technology just doesn't hold any truth anymore. So now what we'll do is we're going to look at an overview of 7 sectors within the creative industries. And they are music, visual arts, performing arts, video games, film, fashion, museums, and heritage. And we're going to see some examples of the impacts and then also look at some of the opportunities and risks to this tech within these spaces. Important to say as well that a chunk of this work came from a report by the European Commission in 2022, That looked at 10 sectors, but we in the GLA only cover 7, which is why I've only covered 7 within this. But also because this space develops every single week, this presentation really builds on this report. So music, to jump in on music. There was a case last year where 2 of the biggest global artists, Drake and The Weeknd, somebody made a song using their voices, which had nothing to do with them. And then it kicked up a whole conversation around copyright. Is that allowed? Should it be allowed? So on and so forth. You saw an example at the start about how you can clone people's voices using this tech. And I'll play you an example of this one. So for anyone who has dreamed of Kanye West doing a cover of Wonderwall, today is the day for you.
Today's gonna be the day that they're gonna throw a backseat. By now, you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. Well, I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do. That's now.
So pretty bang on. Pretty bang on. And it means if you had dreams of ever singing like Beyonce, then your dreams may well have come true. This one as well. So the Beatles released a new song this year, I think it was, extract John Lennon's voice. But this was an interesting one as well. So here you have the source of revenues for author from royalties in 2019. If we look at the section on the right there, background music is 19%. So background music is, music like if you're in a lift or in a restaurant, the kind of ambient music, which you don't really pay attention to that much, right? That's 19% of 5.7 billion in 2019. What you can do now is you can have AI generated music. So this is an example from Google from last year, from one of their systems, where you type in the type of song that you want, and then it generates it for you. You can see what they've put in here, and I'll give it a play so you can listen. And we'll do one more. So you can see this one, slow tempo, bass and drums led reggae song, and I'll play it for you. So yeah, automatically generated music. And when I see people playing about with this stuff on YouTube, it's not necessarily that they just create a song and then copy and paste it. They'll have something generated, then they'll tweak it, and then they'll generate something else, and it's not right, and they'll generate it again. So they're really using it as a tool. And so in the overall presentation resource pack that I have, at the end of each of these segments, you have stuff like this. So in this case, you'd have 3 pages of opportunities within this space. But this is way too dense to be giving you in presentation form now. So as we go through, I'll just give you some kind of key nuggets, so to speak. But you can get all of the detail in the slides after this. So the first one, I'd say on top of the stuff we saw, was that it's estimated that 50% of music revenues go missing completely in the industry. Now, as I mentioned at the start, when it comes to big data analysis, AI can be used to detect when a song is played, which could mean that artists get more revenue than they did before. Also, record labels can use AI to analyze lots and lots of data to predict which songs will be successful. There was a case of an artist, a producer called Alex the Kid, who did this a few years ago. He had an AI system analyze hit songs, and that could then tell which songs would be successful. What does it take to make a successful song? And it could say it needs to be this tempo, this genre, on this subject. He then took that information, made a song, and then that hit number 4, I think, in the iTunes charts that year. And then also interestingly, the streaming service Deezer has developed AI technology which can identify and potentially delete songs that have cloned people's voices. So that's using AI to combat AI. Onto the risks and challenges, there are huge issues and questions around copyright, which we'll come to towards the end. And then also AI and automatically generated music could be used in other areas. So film, video games, other sectors. But then what is it like for those artists if their work is reduced in those sectors because of this? Moving on to performing arts, dynamic pricing. So dynamic pricing, I think most of us would have experienced in some way by now. That's when there's not a static price for a product. It's when the price changes depending on a variety of factors. And it's AI that's used to do that because of the data analysis behind that. Some well-known examples are Uber, Amazon, Airbnb, and airlines in general. But in the UK, we've seen a few venues, performing arts venues, start to use this now as well. So Ticketmaster is one, which is a huge organization which has tickets from, you know, for all of the kind of major artists as such. The Barbican, which is another very big venue in London, one of their spaces was using dynamic pricing for their seats. I don't know if they still do, but they used it at one point. And then also a big festival for us, so the Edinburgh International Festival started using it last year. But then also text to speech. So what you can do is you can type in the type of text that you want and have it read out to you in an AI generated voice. This, what you hear is from last year, but the rate at which this develops is super fast. So even this has developed from then.
Welcome back to our channel, history enthusiasts. Today, we have a fascinating topic to explore. The history of bubblegum. From its humble beginnings to its worldwide popularity, bubblegum has a unique story. So let's dive right in.
So if you're a voice artist, then, you know, I'll come back to this shortly, but this is now part of the competition when it comes to getting work. AI dance choreography as well. What you can do with this tech is you can play a song and it will generate a piece of dance choreography for you. Now, I'm not sure how, the thing, I play this because, not because I think that this is going to take over from dance choreographers anytime soon, I don't. But with all of this tech, choreograph a piece of dance, I think all of us would have said no, but now it's at that stage. With this one as well, what you can do is you can ask it, you know, change a leg movement or change an arm movement, and it will adjust the rest of the body to your edits as well. We looked at chatbots towards the start of this. There was an example of Wicked on Broadway last year, not last year, I think in 2019, experimenting with chatbots. So they used them to offer a smoother customer journey when it came to ticketing inquiries. It handled more than 90,000 requests, including ticket sales. And the ticket sales were sold for, tickets were 20% higher than their weekly average through using this. And it had a 700% return on investment. Again, I think this was in 2019, which was, you know, 5 years ago. And this tech is worlds apart from where things were before. Onto a few more opportunities. So AI can be used to analyze audience data to improve decision-making in business processes. Also in the UK, the National Theatre using people access subtitles and captions in real time. And then real-time voice translations, such as Google Interpreter, could allow venues to offer real-time translation on the fly in multiple different languages. On to some risks and challenges. So one of our biggest trade unions in the UK, in the creative industries, they did a survey of performers. 65% viewed AI as a threat to their work, but that rose to 93% for audio artists. We're already seeing in the UK that things like radio adverts or even YouTube voiceovers are now going to this technology because of how easy it is to do. And that area of work didn't necessarily pay great on its own, but it's a huge chunk of work for their careers and their livelihoods. And it's now just going, if not gone, to this technology. Artists are also often not fairly paid for AI-related work, so they can sometimes be paid once and then have that used forever and ever, but still being paid as if it's only being used once rather than in thousands of projects. And then similarly, contracts are often unclear about the usage of people's work when it comes to AI. It is quite a big battle in a lot of different spaces around this, and we'll touch on this again a little bit later on. Visual arts, moving on to visual arts. This is probably one of the ones which people are quite familiar with, I think, by now. With these systems, things like Midjourney, you type in the type of image that you want, and then it generates that image for you. And just like we saw at the start, that works on being trained on millions to billions of other images to learn what images are like. I've put in here the text prompts that people put in to generate these images. So in the middle, you've got Milky Way in a glass bottle, 4K, which is the resolution, Unreal Engine, which is a video game engine, and you can see the rest. So yeah, you type in what you want, and then it generates the image. As a couple of examples, there's a wonderful woman in London who's an arts marketer, and she really uses AI and is a champion of it in her work. And these were two examples of slides that she has, or that she delivered in a presentation that I saw from her. I don't know what it is, but she loves lemons, absolutely loves lemons. So in this whole slide pack she had, there were literally just lemons everywhere. But she was really able to cater the slides to what she wanted by using AI generated imagery. And if I were to try and compete with this, on my own, it'd be quite hard because these are solid looking slides. But you can also now play with this even more. So what you can do is you can animate the images that you get. So what they've done here is they had an image generated for them, and then they can have it animated so it gives you a little quick video clip from it as well. This one, you can see the image on the left and then the animation on the right. But that's even extended a bit more. So this came about literally just a few months ago, where you can specify which parts of an image you want to animate.
Another example, I want to make my character's clothes glow in the wind. So I'll start by adding a small mask within the cloth element of my image, making sure not to brush onto the background or the other parts of my character. Now I'll give it some motion in the direction the fabric is flowing, and Motion Brush will do the rest. This same mechanic will work with pretty much anything: hair, eyeline, facial expressions, and time-lapse elements like moving clouds.
But also not just generating images, but image upscaling. As you'll see here, I think we've all seen examples before of really poor quality images, which seem like they've come from 50 years ago, What is it now to use AI to really upscale those images? Here's another one from Adobe, which came out a few months ago. This one speaks for itself.
And then you can just click on things and move them around. Matter of fact, delete it. The shadow goes with it. There are no holes in the background, and we can put something else in our hand instead. All of these blurry people in the background that I want to take out, I don't even need to tell it who to delete. It just understands the assignment. And if you want to change your outfit, you just select each piece with one click and describe the clothes you want to wear in your own words.
And this can also be done with people, as you'll see here.
Here's another example that looks like a stock image. She's able to select any individual character in this image and move that character around.
Because of course it magically knows what he looks like behind her.
And it automatically filled in the area behind her.
And then I'll just flag this as well. So this isn't out yet. This is a system by OpenAI. And this is a text to video system. So the way this works is you type in the type of video that you want, and then it generates the video for you. And it's due out at the end of this year, they've said. So I've put in 4 clips from here, which are from their website. And yeah, what they've done is they've typed what they want, and then it generates the video for you. I will send, you will get this afterwards as well, so you can play these to yourself. You can get an idea of the different styles to them as well, right? In one man. And as I say, that's due out this year. Images and photographs, as we've seen examples of. But also, the art industry suffers from fake work being sold as authentic, and you can use AI to authenticate the work, which can help human beings speed up the process. Onto some risks and challenges. There are huge issues when it comes to copyrights, which again we'll touch on towards the end. And then the software might be expensive to do this. I think that things like Photoshop will just roll these into their systems, but then doesn't mean that you need to have Photoshop in order to be competitive within the industry. And if so, then there's a barrier for entry in terms of costs when it comes to that. And also AI can be used to create and sell work by artists that they didn't create, but in the name of them and with their style. Onto video games. So video games is an interesting one because video games have been at the forefront of AI since video games have existed. If you've played any game which has any kind of computer character in it, they're usually controlled by an artificial intelligence. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of this technology is crossing over into other sectors. And one of the biggest uses of those is Unreal Engine. So Unreal Engine is a video game engine used to design video games, but it's now being used in other areas of the creative industries. There's a show in London called ABBA Voyage. If you love ABBA, you would love this show. It's the best way to imagine it is like ABBA holograms, but they're not. But that's the closest way to picture it. They kind of did their performances in motion capture suits, like the original ABBA group. And then they were digitally rendered in Unreal Engine. So when you're seeing the production, it's done in this huge, massive like stadium, custom built stadium with a huge LED screen. And it looks real because of that it's not real, but it's possible because of the level of detail of it. This one was from the BBC with the Tokyo Olympics. The reporters were reporting on the Tokyo Olympics a few years ago, except they weren't in Tokyo. Unfortunately for them, they were in a green screen room in London. And the background that you see is all done in Unreal Engine, which again is video game technology. This image here that you see, it looks like a still image, but it's a screen capture from a kind of 3D world in Unreal Engine. So if you were to open this up, you'd be able to move around within this world. And this one as well, just to show you the level of detail that this goes to. I'll play this as well, just to put this into your mind. And again, this is from Unreal Engine, but I'll come back to this idea again in just a moment, and I'll explain why I'm going through this. But yeah, fundamentally, you've got a 3D world, a 3D game world in Unreal Engine, which you can move around in, right? This was from a game called Hellblade, which released a couple of weeks ago. This is it's a still image from the game, so it looks real, and the character is based on a real person. It's a real actor acting it, but this is an image from the game. And the reason why I show this is because, again, the level of detail that this engine can go to. And also, real-world objects can be scanned into Unreal Engine. So what is it like to take the real-life assets and data and then to plug that into your digital assets? Before we move on, video games. So the opportunities, video games draw on many different art forms. And the developments in AI in any one of those forms would impact on video games. So the impact on, design, on writing, on voiceover work, all of that will have an impact on video games. Voice acting is one of the most expensive parts of a game, which AI can support with. We'll see some more examples of that as we go through. On to some of the risks and challenges. Limited access to data could restrict innovation and creativity amongst smaller businesses and researchers. When it comes to AI, whoever has the most and the highest quality data has the competitive advantage. So if you're Netflix, if you're Amazon, if you're Spotify, you have more data at your disposal than other smaller organizations. And that could create a monopoly when it comes to the industry, but also this technology. And then lastly on this, adaptive games can learn you and learn what works for you to keep you hooked, but then that has the potential to make certain games addictive if they really hone in on that tech. Onto film. So virtual sets is what we're going to look at first. So virtual sets, films for the past few decades have traditionally used green screen. So I think we all know this by now. You have a green screen, and then after everything's been filmed, they put the special effects in after that, right? Virtual sets work differently. So what you see on this screen here now is an example of a virtual set. And they're starting in some spaces, certainly at high levels, to replace green screen. So rather than having sets like this with The Mandalorian on Disney+, your set would be like this, yeah? And the way to imagine this is that the big screen that you see there is like an LED screen. So physically it's flat, but the background itself is a video game world. So just like we saw before, how you've got Unreal Engine and how you can move around in the space, that's what the background is rather than a still image. So it means that as the camera moves around the space, the background will move to adjust to it as well. And it means that you can change things on the fly. So if you want to change the lighting, you can instantly change it. If you're filming at the front of a bar and it's not working out, you can move to the back or you can move inside, right? So it gives you much more flexibility to do things on the fly, but also it means you'd have to do more preparation before filming, much better than being just in a green room, right? Here's an interesting one as well. So what we have here is an example of AI. Well, I'll play it too, and it should speak for itself. Just to flag, what you see is you'll see several different clips here. And in the first clip, the woman swears. The reason why I say that is because I completely missed that the first time I saw it. And I just didn't get the point of the video. But so the first time she swears, and then you see what the technology can do after that.
Now we're stuck on this stupid tower in the middle of nowhere. And I don't blame you, and now we're stuck on this stupid freaking tower in the middle of freaking nowhere. And it's all my fault.
So I know people have different internet speeds. Just for those who might not have seen it, what's happening is she's speaking, and the AI is automatically translating the new voice and the edits that are being made. And you saw a few clips towards the end of that of her speaking a different language. Here's another example of that.
Speak any language. You ready? For instance, here I am speaking Japanese. 日本語化せることを知らなかったが、私が話していることだ。もし日本語化せるなら、私が話していることを知る。Now switch it up. Here I am speaking French en français. J'adore les croissants et prendre le petit déjeuner et fumer des cigarettes car je viens de France. Vous avez probablement entendu dire que vous êtes de France maintenant. I can keep going. You want me to speak Hindi? Yeah.
And you get the idea. So his same tone of voice being matched to his lips, right? And this is being played about with different organizations. So Spotify are one. Last year, they announced that they're going to have a play with voice translation for their podcasts. So it's essentially having your favorite podcasters in different languages, but still with their same voice. This one as well was interesting. So this is from, well, there was a film called Morgan, which came out a few years ago. And they wanted to see if AI could be used to support the making of a trailer. So what they did was the AI system Watson was given 100+ horror film trailers that were cut into separate moments and scenes that then analyzed each scene to learn the dynamics of a film trailer. It then processed 90 minutes of the film to find the right moments to include. And so even though it wasn't a case of them pressing a button and getting their trailer, it reduced the time to make the trailer from 10 to 30 days to 24 hours, which is huge. You know, if you imagine as well, if you're making, say, a documentary with 500 hours worth of footage, that's quite a game changer potentially. This as well, so James O. Jones sold his voice to Disney, which means that they can use his voice to make Darth Vader forevermore. And Tom Hanks has said that essentially they could recreate him and you could have Tom Hanks films forevermore because of deep fake technology. So even after an actor dies, you could still have them in future performances. Here are some images of actors who had either passed away or who were much older from when these films came out. I think we've all seen images of or films with deepfake stuff now. But then this was a huge issue from a negotiation perspective when it came to the writers' strike last year. So this was one of the quotes from the unions where they said they proposed that our background performers should be able to be scanned, get 1 day's pay, and their company should own that scan, their image, their likeness, and should be able to use it for the rest of eternity on any projects they want with no compensation or consent. Essentially, you could kind of remove the need for extras technically. So that could fundamentally be a huge change to the industry. But that's what people like trade unions are trying to combat. On to some more opportunities for film. Personal advertisements. When House of Cards came out on Netflix, they had 10 different trailers for House of Cards, and they could show you a different trailer based on your social media data and interests. So if you liked Kevin Spacey more, it could give you a trailer with more Kevin Spacey. If you liked more action-orientated trailers, it could give you more action-y one. So really using your data to personalize what it gives to you. Films and TV shows can be commissioned based on audience viewing data, which is what places like Netflix and Amazon do. And then also, this tech could help to democratize filmmaking and make filmmaking tools more accessible to a wider audience. Risks and challenges: there's a low awareness of AI when it comes to the film industry, and that might result in missed opportunities in this space. But then, as we said, deepfake technology has the potential to replace film extras and actors. And yeah, you could easily make an agreement where you license out your voice or your face or your performance for other projects without you knowing. And then some jobs that are currently human only could be replaced or in competition with jobs that are AI or digital computers. So two more. We've got fashion and museums, and let's do fashion. So here we have an AI-generated clothing and the catwalk. And just like everything else, this works in the same way as we saw at the start, where you train these systems on this information and data that you want.
So it's the computer that's designing these dresses.
Yeah, so this is a generative adversarial network that has been fed many thousands of images so that it begins to learn what a dress looks like and then design its own. So every single one of these is computer generated.
Slightly terrifying.
And similarly, this is taking thousands of catwalk images from Men's Fashion Week and beginning to understand what a catwalk looks like, what a model looks like, what the clothes they're wearing looks like, and generating its own catwalk images.
Are these real models or computer?
These are computer generated.
Oh, wow. So this person doesn't exist?
No.
Mm-hmm. Then there was a case last year where Levi's, the company, partnered with an organization to have AI-generated models. And you know, that could be hyper realistic models with a variety of different, you know, body types, ages, sizes, so on and so forth. One of the arguments as to why they said they did that was because they wanted to increase the diversity of their models. But then the industry said, well, if you want to increase the diversity of your models, then why don't you just hire more diverse models? But that was their argument, their conversation, right? This one as well. So fast fashion is a real problem when it comes to the industry. So you give, you know, an influencer an item of clothing, they wear it once and then throw it away. Here you'll see the model on the left with the same piece of clothing, but you can overlay the clothing on top of her. So you wouldn't need to actually give them any clothing at all with this potentially. On to some opportunities, predictive trend forecasting. So similarly to how we talked about big data before, you can use AI to analyze, let's say, social media to see what trends are happening within the industry. So then you can adjust your fashion output based on those trends. Again, no way that a human being would be able to analyze things in that way. Also, specialized companies can offer tools to find the order twice as many things as they need to when it comes to online, because you know something might be too big, too small. So online returns are a huge there's a huge area of waste when it comes to that. So using AI, that could massively reduce the amount of waste that comes from that sector, from that. And also it can reduce a company's inventory by 20 to 50%. I spoke to someone in the industry a few weeks ago about this, and they said that AI behind the scenes for fashion is an absolute game changer. And he said that those companies now, which are taking it on board, are going to be massively ahead of the game compared to those who don't within a few years' time. Risks and challenges: larger companies will have the resources to apply this, whereas smaller companies won't. Privacy and data protection issues are crucial here, especially when it comes to things like, you know, fitting in the size of your body for these tools. But companies will need access to this data in order for things to be effective for them. So there is a bit of a challenge there for them as well. On to the final section, museums and heritage. What I'm going to play here is, I'll just caveat this slightly. I'm not sure what the source is for this. And certainly in certain countries like the UK, data protection laws mean that this wouldn't be able to happen. But there are certainly companies within the world where it would. So what you see is, you've got a cafe, and it can detect how long a customer has been in the place for. And then you can also see how many cups a staff member has sold within the store. Now, there's a few things to bring up from this. The first is that Olga has sold 3 cups, and I'm hoping that she's just started a shift, because compared to Anna, that is really not the best. But also, if you look on the right, you can see the colored squiggle lines, and what that is that it's tracking the path of those individuals in the space. So what does it mean, for example, to have a museum or to have a park and to be able to tell where people are within that space? And then you could adjust your venue based on the movements of people within your space, right? This was another interesting one. So AI can be used to classify or tag artworks. And it can be faster and more detailed than human beings. If you're a gallery and if you have 1 million images, to tag all of those images for a digital system for a human being is really quite challenging. What you have here are the human tags. So the human being would put, this is a woman, portrait, a sheep. Well, not a sheep, but there's a sheep in the image. But then the computer-generated tags came up with Halloween witch, person, waxwork, kirtle dress. You can see the rest. And just like with all of this stuff, it might not be that you want to use all of them, but to say you can do this at a much faster, quicker speed than a human being, it's a great tool potentially to have and to use. The National Gallery, they flagged to me that they used this before the pandemic, so they're not using it anymore, but they did use it at one stage. What they had was a custom data model, which they built for themselves. And that could predict the future demand and capacity of AI to do that. So they had 20+ years of data. And like I said, the more data that you have, the better your systems will be. And then they created a dashboard which could provide a picture of ticket sales, attendance patterns, revenue generation. And this here is just a mock-up of what the dashboard would look like. Not the actual thing, but it's just to give you a flavor. And that could then predict attendance for the next 12 to 18 months. And that could influence ticket prices, exhibition location, exhibition calendar, exhibition runtime, and the marketing activities around those. And the last thing I'll show on this is just an interesting one which came up from the Museum of Art. They had a automatically generated piece of artwork, which is constantly being refreshed, renewed, generated based on 200 years of artwork once you see everything afterwards. I would say the lack of awareness, skills, and knowledge about AI to museum professionals would lead to a limited understanding of the opportunities in this space. So, yeah, lack of awareness in this sector, I think, is the biggest risk really when it comes to AI. So just really quickly on copyright, which is the second to last thing that I'll cover just before we close, because there are copyright implications when it comes to these things. There are two questions that come up with copyright. So the first is, should AI systems be allowed to use third-party content to generate their responses? So something like the images, they've been trained on millions to billions of images and other people's images. The first question is, should they be allowed to use that content to train their systems? And also, should those artists be paid or compensated, and how should they be paid and compensated? All right. Second one is, should humans be credited as the authors of AI-generated content, or should the AI itself or the owner of the AI system be the author of it? And I thought that was quite a straightforward question, actually, when I first started this, but it's actually much more complex and complicated. There are different views to both of those questions, depending on the industry, the person, the country, but those are the fundamental questions. I'm not going to go into them anymore now because you could have a whole session on them, but fundamentally, those are the questions. And to close, or before the final slide, there are a few points overall which I think everybody should consider. The first is that skills training will be essential, not just for newer people in the creative industries, but for the existing workforce as well. Secondly, cross-sectoral collaborations between different sectors is probably going to happen more, and it should be encouraged. We saw examples of that with Unreal Engine as an example, and all of the developments with AI in Unreal Engine will cross over to other spaces. Copyright issues need to be addressed, which we've discussed. And then high quality data is the key to getting the full potential from AI. And again, whoever owns the most and highest quality data will have the advantage. So final slide to close. This has changed quite a few times over the time because things change so much. But I would say change brings disruption, but also new potential. And for that, I would like to give a shout out and a thank you to the chatbot Claude AI, who helped me to come up with that. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful. That brings me to the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Lyndon. Big round of applause. I have big thanks to give to you, Lyndon, in part because, I mean, it was a fabulous talk, and I can tell because the chat is blowing up. So that's very exciting. Unfortunately, we're over on time, so we're going to have to relegate the Q&A part to the chat. And I think it's been a fantastic experience for everyone seeing your wonderful content and then engaging with it in the chat. The big downside, unfortunately, is it wasn't interactive for you, Lyndon, because you were just feeding us this great material and we were running with it. So we're going to make sure we get a copy of the chat made available to you. You can look through it now, but the chat will go up when we put up the summary doc for all of this. As an example, I will share that there was a question asked early on, I think by Sunil, about why creative thinking or critical thinking might not be is rated as low exposure in AI. And so we asked the chatbot to answer this one, and it gave a very uncritical and meandering answer. But then I asked it to give the answer in the form of a limerick, and that's a pretty good answer. So I'll paste that in the chat here in a minute. But I'll leave it to everybody else. Keep using the chat, and let's give a big round of applause to Lyndon for a fantastic talk, please. And
thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome, Lyndon. It's been a pleasure. We've got our next panel, or the last one, is a roundtable, which is starting now at 11:45 Eastern. So we're going to segue right into it. And I will say one last thing. If Lyndon is able to share any of that material with us, we will then share it on with all the attendees. Just make sure you're coming back to this the conference symposium website soon, in a day or two. But we'll send out an email blast to all the registrants to remind you, so you don't even have to make a note of it. Okay. we approach the end, our last big part of the symposium, our roundtable on AI applications. Welcome to everybody. There might be some cameras turned off briefly as people have run out of the room to go take a restroom break and come right back. So we'll do a quick introduction. So I do want to keep on schedule and make sure you have your full allotted hour, because I'm excited to hear this conversation. We've got as our host, David Crandall from Indiana University, someone who I've recently met and who Joanne actually plugged earlier in the day as someone who's got a really good bit of expertise that's relevant to a lot of this conversation on computer visualization and things like that. But he has the privilege of moderating the discussion here between or among Jax DeLuca, Howard Herring, and Andrew Racinos, who've been around for most, if not all, of the symposium here and have been hearing where we're at, and they'll tell us where we're going to go next. So I'll get out of the way and hand the mic over to Professor Crandall.
Oh, thank you so much, Doug, for that introduction. Yeah, so we have this really great panel lined up today, and I thought I'd just start by introducing everybody with like a formal introduction, just a couple sentences about everyone to get sort of the honorifics and so on out of the way. And then I think each of the panelists has prepared a few minutes of comments about their thoughts on the general topic of sort of AI applications in this domain. And then we'll open it up for questions both from me and from the audience. To start the introductions, first I'm pleased to introduce Jax DeLuca, who's the Media Arts Director at the National Endowment for Arts and oversees the federal grant portfolio, which supports film and media arts across the country. Among her many accomplishments, she's spearheaded initiatives focused on strengthening regional arts initiatives and promoting equity and career sustainability within the creative industry. She's also a co-author of the report Tech as Art, supporting artists using technology as a creative medium. And she has a degree from the Institute for Electronic Arts at Alfred University and is a maintains a creative practice in sound and experiential performance. And then the next panelist is Howard Herring. He's president and CEO of the New World Symphony. He's a pianist by training, and after completing his academic work at Southern Methodist University and Manhattan School of Music, he was a pianist of the Claremont Trio. He won the Artists International Competition. He was an active musician and teacher in New York City. Since assuming leadership of New World Symphony in 2001, he's been in charge of revitalizing that institution, and among many accomplishments there, in 2011, the New World Symphony opened a new music building designed by Frank Gehry on time and on budget. He has an honorary doctorate from the Manhattan School of Music. And then finally, Andrew Racinos is the president and CEO of Tessitura Network, which is a nonprofit tech company serving arts and cultural organizations around the world. Prior to joining Tessitura, he spent several years as a member of the leadership team of Jacobson Consulting Applications, an independent technology company devoted to the nonprofit sector. And he had a variety of roles in fundraising and technology at Carnegie Hall in New York City. He's a pianist, trumpet player, and composer. He has a Bachelor of Music degree from Jacobs School of Music here at IU, as well as a master's degree in arts administration from the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. And finally, I'll just say I forgot to introduce myself. I'm David Crandall. I'm professor of computer science here at Indiana University, and I'm director of the Luddy Artificial Intelligence Center here that we have on campus. So with all of those sort of honorifics out of the way, I thought I would pass the baton along to our panelists one by one, who've prepared a few thoughts on the general topic that we're talking about today. And so, Jax, would you mind starting? Just to surprise you.
Oh boy. Okay. I have a feeling my quick presentation will be a little bit different than the ones that Howard and Andrew will be doing. So, but Sunil and I thought this was a good moment to really just show what we've been seeing and thinking about at our agency. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick, and I will go through a flash presentation. So, as David mentioned, a few years back, Sunil and I, through the Office of Research and Analysis at the Arts Endowment, did a field scan on technology and the arts. And we were really looking through this through the lens of artists who were using technology as a creative medium. And we were looking at this across all disciplines. And in this report, we do have a lot of technology-focused artists and organizations, but we really built this report as a way for people to better understand the ecosystem of how artists are navigating these worlds, because we thought it would be useful for arts administrators in the future to understand kind of where some of these networks already exist and where they're kind of growing, because this is definitely we're definitely at a new era, as mentioned probably 1,000 times in this conference, where the new generation of artists and arts educators and arts audiences are really coming up with, they're growing up alongside really advanced tools that are constantly changing faster than ever before. So what's really funny about this report is we had a whole section about how code, computation, and data were building blocks for arts creation at this moment, and it is an essential part of the artist toolbox, whether it's in the process of making the work or also distributing it. It's really affecting, and artists are really thinking about this. But a lot of the artists who were deeply thinking in this field didn't really consider themselves part of the arts field. So that was something new for arts administrators to really be thinking about, how we're including and representing the artists who have been working in this field for decades prior, right? So one of the things that we kind of emphasize inside this report are ways that we could be bridging across different sectors and disciplines for both learning and thinking about how code, computation, and data are all connective tissues. But the thing is, when we did this report a few years ago, so much has changed since then. So one of the case studies that we have in the report is Rafiq Anadol. And what's really interesting about Rafiq's work is before he was working, still with very advanced technology at the time. And I'm sure you are all familiar with his work. If not, you should look it up or look up the Tech as Art report, which has a case study and a video on his work. So his work has even changed dramatically in the past 5 years. And right now he's working on a 2025 project that is called the Large Nature Model, which will be the world's first open source generative AI model dedicated to nature and trained on the most extensive and ethically collected data set of the natural world. So this kind of goes to show the change and the shifts in thinking from using these tools to actually being the developer of a tool. Likewise, another case study participant was Stephanie Dinkins, and she was recently named one of the LG Guggenheim Award recipients for her pioneering work in AI and technology, and also teaching communities who might be disproportionately affected by algorithmic bias and other parts of all that comes with AI and ethics. So Stephanie Dinkins is in our report, and a lot has happened since then. And likewise, Amelia Winger-Beerskin is another one of the case studies, who's a classically trained opera singer. And now she's the chair and associate professor of AI in the arts at the Digital Worlds Institute at the University of Florida, which is the first program of its kind. So that's a really huge deal. So we're actually, what it seems like is we might be overdue for another arts and technology field scan. One of the things that came out of this field scan was that we really put an extra focus on arts, technology, and creative practice. So we are now funding a lot of projects that are looking at AI in different ways. And one of the main things that we have in our grants description is that we have a focus on, or we encourage projects that seek to address, develop creative work, exploring, reflecting on the impacts of artificial intelligence in a way that's consistent with valuing human artistry. That's essential right now. A lot of arts funders are thinking about this. And we also are thinking about support for projects that improve the public's awareness or the understanding of the responsible use of AI in the field of arts. And I will say this is a substantial change from even 3 years ago that we even have this in our guidelines. And definitely it's been a topic of what we're hearing other state arts agencies thinking about, how they might incorporate guidelines in their grants. So just to keep this short, I'll just kind of pop through a few different grantee projects, but you'll see with SETI Institute at Portland State University, they're supporting, we're supporting workshops that are advancing digital skill sets. A lot of this has to do with AI. Artists and Hackers is a podcast that we're supporting that I highly encourage you to look up. This past season was all about generative AI and public domain. And there's some really intriguing conversations there around the topics that I'm sure that came up earlier in this conference. We also support New Ink, which has a few different artist tracks that pair artists with technologists. And some of those artists are also technologists themselves, but they're working on new arts technology that is built by and for artists or arts organizations. And they have a special museums track. So this again is just pointing towards, we will have a lot of very skilled generations coming into the arts workforce soon, which is really exciting to see and good for us to know. And another program that we'll be supporting is through American Composers Orchestra. And it's a commission of a new work by Suzanne Kite, who is working with small language models for compositions. And so I wanted to throw that in there to just show that we are supporting a lot of different types of projects that are investigating or using AI in different ways. And our office has also been working with NSF to really think about this type of algorithmic arts and educators, and trying to work on more integration among arts practitioners and computer science practitioners. So definitely ask us about that. And that's really in a nutshell, and I hope that that was as fast as it could be. And I will stop there.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I guess we'll move on to Howard Herring. Do you have some thoughts to share in the group?
Yes, I do. Thank you, David. Good to see you, Andrew. Long time. Just a couple of words about New World Symphony, because it is important to know the background. We're 36 years old this year. It was the vision of Michael Tilson Thomas that there was a middle ground between academic work and professional life. So we have fellowships, 87 fellowships. Our players come to us from all over the world. They have to have an undergraduate degree. The majority have a master's. And then they move from their experience with us on into their professional lives. We replace 30 players per year. We have over 1,000 applications for those 30 openings. So it's quite an intelligent and talented group of players that are ours for 3 years at least, and that's important for the words that I'm going to deliver next. We became digital in 2002. The National Endowment for the Arts and the National Science Foundation, $100,000 each, gave us a grant at that point, an interlocking grant, and they said, "You people seem to be interested. Here's some money. Go get them." And we proceeded to install cameras and a new microphone system in our building and began to think about what that might mean. We worked our way forward. In 2011, we opened the New World Center, which is firmly digital. Infrastructure is all there, and we tried to give ourselves as much flexibility as possible. What's important is, because I think flexibility, we may come back to that word as we go through this session, I think is extremely important as we move into the future of what we've been listening to, and as everyone's described it today. We were very much about online learning since 2002. Andrew saw us demonstrate some online learning way back in 2004. We had Manhattan School Chamber Orchestra over at Columbia. They had just wired one of their larger conference rooms, and Michael Tilson Thomas from Miami coached and conducted this group, and it kind of worked. They asked Michael what it felt like. He said, "Well, it felt like conducting a European orchestra. There's always a lag between the orchestra speaking and the conductor's signal." And for him, that's what it felt like, that sort of second and a half that is very much too long if you're accustomed to an American orchestra. We got deeply into online distribution. This is both enormously promising and puzzling to us. We also used the technology that we have to create theatrical productions that surround orchestra music and chamber music and solo recitals. We went naturally, organically to AI. I'm going to give you some examples in just a moment. And in answer to yesterday's question about the pessimism, we are truly optimistic and enthusiastic, and we are eager to make the next. So let me give you just a couple of thoughts on what we have done so far with AI. Image generation using words is something that we do not often, but we have discovered that it is quite efficient and it's quite successful. We did this is a program generated by the fellows last year, an orchestral program. It's all about 20th century Mexican music. And as they developed this program, they started thinking about the origin myth that is part of that, that is of that part of the world. The straw man, the stone man, the clay man, and they couldn't really find the images that they wanted for the video that was going to back up the orchestral presentation, so they just used AI. What we got was successful both in the hall and outside. We have a wall casting system outside, not AI, but technologically sophisticated. So that was the first one. It worked for the players and it worked for the audience. We do fellow profiles for every concert. We give a little background on our individual players, and you use these old pictures from when they were children, and they are fuzzy and not as clear as you would want. And of course, AI allows you to adjust the background, brighten things. It does make a difference. You might not think it's a big deal, but over the long haul, we think it will be. We also, this is a little bit of a complicated project, but to describe, and I'm happy to provide video of this for anyone who's curious. Stéphane Deneuve is our artistic director now, and in his first full season, last September, we did a presentation of La Mer. There were 3 paintings that Debussy knew very, very well. One hung in his studio, and the other 2 he describes in his writings. We took pictures of those 3 paintings. We then began to use the color, not the reference in the paintings, but the color, to bathe our 5 sails, the visual elements of the New World Symphony, and all of our downlights, and we created an atmosphere, an environment that was of the color of those paintings. And then we played La Mer. Now, in 1905, if you had gone to the premiere, you would have closed your eyes and imagined the sea. But in our circumstance, we went the other way. We used the color of these paintings to bring forward what we imagined was in Debussy's mind and what he was trying, one of the things he was trying to conjure up, in our case, enhancing the music itself. We use AI for managing our digital assets, and we are aware that things are getting better and better and better in terms of facial recognition. We're waiting for instrument recognition, because as we load all this stuff into our hard drives, we want to be able to get to it quickly, edit it, and then put it out. And then I guess my last AI, it wasn't really AI at the time, but it certainly falls into the category. When we finished the building, we asked a technologist from UCLA, Casey Reyes, technologist and an artist, to work with Tal Rosner, who was a filmmaker and doing some things for opening of the building. And we asked them to take pictures of the creation of our building. And at the end of that, create an ever-changing, on into infinity, artistic statement that we run on our wall every night. It is, some days you can see that it is actually parts of a building under construction. Some days it's just images of shapes and colors, but it's up there every night, and we're going to keep doing it as long as we can afford to plug the projector in. So that's a sense of how we use AI. I hope that's helpful.
That is great. Thank you so much. And then finally, we'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Hello, Jax, Howard, nice to see you. And to Joanna and Doug, it's just been what a fantastic couple of days. Just so interesting to see all the great work and research that's being done around AI. I do have some slides. I'm a musician and I like form, so I wanted to have a slide deck to help give me a little bit of form. And so, first of all, just David gave my bio. How I entered this conversation about AI and the arts and culture world is as a musician, as an arts administrator, as a technologist, and sort of taking all of those things together to get the what seems like the most perfect job in the world is leading a technology company that is focused entirely on arts and culture. We were asked at the start of today whether we were using AI in this symposium. And so this is where I will tell you that this entire slide deck was created with Copilot for PowerPoint, which is Copilot is Microsoft's AI, which uses GPT under the hood. And so while I have never actually played the harmonica, this is the image it came up with for this slide. And in keeping with our theme, I decided I would just keep it up. Just really quick about Tessitura. If you don't know us, we are a technology company that only works with cultural organizations. We provide ticketing and fundraising, e-commerce, analytics for more than 800 cultural organizations around the world, including the New World Symphony, which is how Howard and I know each other, but also the National Gallery that Lyndon just mentioned, National Theater, and others all around the world. Unusual in that we are a nonprofit. So this is an industry that is largely commercial, but Tessitura is not. We're a nonprofit co-op since our founding. And we use AI quite a lot, directly and also through our partners. So as a transactional system, transacting billions of dollars of commerce through our systems every year, we use AI for fraud protection. We use it for cyber defense. Machine learning for that. We also use it in the product itself. So I'll show you in a minute how we use it for predictive analytics. Again, something that Lyndon touched on, but the ability to take large amounts of data and forecast potential sales trends, membership trends, donor trends, that sort of thing. Our partners use it extensively as well. So we actually, again, sort of referencing Lyndon, we have several partners actually who do dynamic pricing that utilize our data and come up with dynamic pricing algorithms. And I could go on, but it's very much in our world and only growing. So from sort of my day-to-day work as well as my background as a performing artist myself, I've thought deeply, read deeply about the intersection of AI, arts, and culture. And I thought I would distill it into just a couple of observations, maybe just as a stepping off point or a provocation even, that I feel these days. The first one is I believe that we are in the cassette tape era of AI. There are a lot of folks who are doing, I think we're all kind of trying to say, what is the AI? What does this mean based on previous general purpose technologies? There's a lot of talk about industrial revolution or printing press, that sort of thing. I guess as a musician who grew up in the 80s, I can still remember when the record, the LP that had dominance for so many decades, suddenly was replaced by cassette tapes. And while an LP was amazing and it could be personalized and you could carry it around with you to hear music, the cassette tape could do all of that, but suddenly it was multi-directional. You could record. Everybody could record in their home. You could create mixtapes. You could record things off of the radio. So it was suddenly this sort of explosion, and I think about when ChatGPT came out just over a year ago, late 2022, sort of bringing Gen AI into our consciousness, the fact that it could actually generate for the first time feels very much like that same moment to me. The other thing to say about the tape deck era is it wasn't the end, right? Like it seems kind of quaint now. And I suspect that it won't be long that we feel like where we are today with AI is kind of quaint. If you think about the journey from cassette tapes to Spotify, say, there's an incredible transformation to come, and I truly believe that. And I have, I don't entirely know what it's going to mean, but I think we're just at the beginning. Second overall observation is I think ultimately AI shouldn't be the subject of the sentence. And I think about another general purpose technology that we've all lived through is the rise of the internet. And if you go back and look at some of the early e-commerce companies in the internet age in the 90s, internet was the subject of the sentence. Pets.com was about a pet store, but on the internet. Boo.com did a similar thing with fashion, where their goal was to be a great online retailer. Both of those companies flamed out. At the same time, in the 90s, we had Google, we had Amazon, we had eBay. Those all started in the 90s as well, and yet the subject of their sentence was not the internet. The mission from day one of Amazon is to be the most customer-centric company on the planet. Google's is to organize the world's information. They had a higher calling that happened to leverage the internet, but internet wasn't the subject of the sentence. And I think that as we go further with AI as it comes to arts and culture, I think that where we're going to see real movement and success, AI will absolutely be there under the hood. It will be perhaps the verb, but I don't think it's going to be the AI musician, the AI artist, the AI opera. I think it is going to be great music, great art, great theater that may be utilizing AI to get there. And then as sort of a nuance on that, nonetheless, even if it's not the subject of the sentence, I do believe that we will have AI virtuosos, people who figure out the technology and learn to play it to an incredible degree. And for that comment, I think about an analogy to the microphone, the rise of the microphone in the 1920s, where it was built to amplify and broadcast. And yet by the 1930s, you had folks like Billie Holiday pictured here. You had folks like Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, who realized that the microphone itself could bring the intimate, emotional aspects of the voice that in the past you could only get if you were sitting within 4 or 5 feet of the person, suddenly could go to anyone because they had learned how to use this instrument like a virtuoso. I don't think you would call Billie Holiday a microphone singer, and yet one of the reasons she's well remembered as one of the greatest singers of her time is because she learned how to use the instrument. And I think that AI will be the same way, especially when it comes to the world of arts. So with those 3 observations, I wanted to sort of return to what I was asked to comment on, actually, which is AI applications when it comes to audiences. And I have it in 2 short pieces. First is AI applications in reaching audiences. That is our world at Tessitura. We are all about connecting people with culture. So one way that it's being used today is, as I said, in predictive forecasts, whether it's sales forecasts, membership forecasts, attendance forecasts. And this is an example actually of our technology that is doing that. And our organizations are using that. We have organizations that are using machine learning to dive into the data and look for patterns of, let's say, major donors. Kennedy Center is doing this right now, where they've analyzed the data to see, what is the profile of a major donor, and then grafting it onto the rest of their database. And they have found a surprisingly number of new prospects that they wouldn't have found using traditional means. We're seeing personalized communications based on CRM data. So there are companies like Gravity, for instance, which will take information about a prospect or a donor and create through Gen AI a solicitation that takes that information into account. And then so many of our organizations are using the tools through Meta, through Google in their social campaigns, which now have these sort of end-to-end AI-based campaigns where you can put in images and headlines and text. It can change it through Gen AI. It can then go out and retarget, do A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing to determine which of those campaigns is most effective. And that's really just the beginning. If I think about sort of going beyond the cassette tape era, I think this is just going to increase. The super personalization is going to be exponential. I think that we're going to find marketing and fundraising teams just getting much more powerful. It's not saying we now have an AI team. We have a marketing team that is suddenly augmented in their abilities. And then ultimately, and I think that this is the goal of all of us at Tessitura, is that we want to reduce the mundane work, the transactional works, and so that we can lift up the personal and the interactive work. And then finally, when it comes to AI applications for actually enhancing the audience experience, these are 3 very quick potential uses. I feel like AI in the audience experience ultimately can create what I call a translated experience, a personal experience, and an interactive experience. First, around sense augmentation, especially with the recent release of ChatGPT 4.0, which for the first time includes multimodality, which means that it can see, computer vision that David can talk about. The second thing about the new version of ChatGPT is nearly real time, so you can actually have conversations with it. So sort of two use cases. One is imagining a visit at a museum or a cultural attraction where AI takes in some information from you. What do you feel like? How much time do you have? What are you interested in? It can automatically create a day planner for you using the visual application of something like a GPT 4.0. It can actually provide instantaneous wayfinding. It can see where you are and help you where to go. Of course, from a revenue perspective, it could upsell food, it could upsell retail. If you're spending a bunch of time in front of a particular painting or a work of art, it could suggest that maybe you could purchase the coffee table book related to that. And then most importantly, it's tuned to your level of interest and your level of understanding. And that's what I mean from translation. When we think about cultural organizations that are often talking about how do we make it relevant, how do we make it accessible, if folks are nervous about going to a museum or going to a show because they don't really understand art, they don't understand music, imagine if this sort of augmented AI augmented reality could lower that barrier for you. If you could say, I don't really understand art, but I want to learn, and how it might actually be able to talk to you. Similarly with performance, and I don't know, Howard might hate this idea, but the idea of a performance play-by-play, do you actually have earbuds in that can hear what's happening, can hear that piece of music, can hear La Mer, but I don't know anything about Debussy, and I want to know. Maybe it's explaining to me what's happening. 10 years ago, Philadelphia Orchestra did a project with Drexel University called Live Note, where it was on an app where it was actually telling you what was happening as the score went by. I can imagine AI being a more interactive version of that. We've talked about AI for translation, but what about Oregon Shakespeare Festival several years ago now commissioned several dozen playwrights to translate Shakespeare into modern English, which really split that world down the middle. Some people were horrified at the idea. Others felt that it helped make Shakespeare more accessible. So what if you could use AI to basically do a real life translation of Shakespeare as you're watching the show? So just a few ideas that have been percolating with me, but very happy now to hand it back to David and my co-panelists.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I had some questions written up, but actually I think I'm going to just tear them up because I have something else now reflecting on your presentations. I should say I have enormous imposter syndrome here because I'm just a computer scientist. I've been working in AI and computer vision and machine learning for a long time, since I was like a junior in college. It's been like 25 years or more. And I'm like a very amateur pianist, and that's my credentials to moderate this panel. But in some sense, I feel like I've been actually moving the other direction from many people here. So lots of people here are excited about where AI is going. I've been thinking about AI for a long time, and I actually, the more that I work on it, the more I'm like impressed by people and what people can do, and sort of disappointed by AI. And just as a super silly example, I just got back from London last night, and while I was there, I saw some shows because I like musical theater, and I went to a production of Les Mis, which I've seen many, many times. And I don't know what it was about this particular production. I don't know if it was the cast or the way I felt or the audience or whatever, but this just like moved me and touched me in this way that I just felt like was so profoundly amazing. So anyway, where I'm going with this question is that I think most of the work in AI over the last 60 years has been basically computer scientists like me, doing things that we thought were cool, like trying to get the AI to play chess or drive cars or whatever. And it's clear that like the future's about AI human collaboration. And yet right now, it still seems like computer science computer scientists do things like OpenAI vacuums up the world's data and unleashes a new tool, and then we all kind of react to it, which maybe isn't the way that this should go into the future. So the point of this ramble and question is that two things Jax mentioned in her talk were about emphasizing AI consistent with valuing human artistry. And the other was like bridging across disciplines like AI and computer science, music performance and music engagement and so on, and computer scientists. And so sort of as a two-point question, maybe I'll start with you, Jack, since you sort of sparked these terms in my head. What does that sort of mean to you? What is AI consistent with valuing human artistry really mean? And what would you like to see happen to sort of better bridge between these disciplines?
Sure. I mean, there was a funny thing I just saw on the internet the other day that was someone saying, you know, I don't want to live in a world where AI is creating my art and I'm the one doing the dishes and my dirty work. I would like to live in a world where AI is doing the labor and the dirty work and I can focus on my art. So I think when we're talking about things that are valuing human artistry, it really is how do we, you know, stay true to understanding all of the issues all of the issues that AI could keep opening up, and being aware of that and educated, and understanding where that line is for your particular line of work. It's not the same. We can't look at the impact of AI the same way through the lens of an arts organization or a teaching artist or an artist creating work or presenting work. I feel like each case you have to kind of like look at it singularly to make the determinations of how much of the human touch and the human imagination is packed in there. But I think ideally AI is a tool that I would see as amplifying the arts in different ways. And I think that's no different from when we were at the phase where computers felt like a threat to traditional ways of art making. And recently Art News just republished an article that was written by Stan Vanderbeek. And it is from their archives. So they published this article that was written in 1955. And it was just when there was just the prevalence of computers, but not really like so much in society yet or commercially available. But at the end of this article that he written, I'll put the link in here because it's so fascinating. It's definitely the same crossroads we're at now. It's talking about, it says the future of computers and art will be fantastic as amplifiers of human imagination and responses. Programmed to our interests. And in short, computers will shape the overall ecology of America. And it goes on, and then the last sentence is, art schools in the near future will teach programming as one of the new psycho skills of the new technician, artist, citizen. And it's really interesting because that's kind of what's happening right now. So I think ideally it's just navigating this in the same way that we might have navigated this 70 years ago.
That's great. Thank you. Maybe Howard, I'll get your thoughts on this. So I guess because my question was long and rambly, I'll remind. One question is about what does AI what does AI that's consistent with valuing human artistry kind of mean? And also what kind of like bridging across disciplines, say technical and artistic disciplines, do you think is being done or should be done better or differently going forward?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to echo Jax and Andrew, and I'm observing our players. These are average age 25. They go to it. It's a tool. Thank you very much. I'm here to make music. Oh, yes, I have this to help me out. So there's nothing but optimism as far as I'm concerned when I watch them do it. And the act of crossing over, in the couple of cases I gave before, crossing between technology and the act of making something, in our case, music, and visuals that enhance the music, and sometimes equal value to both. the value of the tool is what you're looking for. The ultimate success is whether the artists are happy and whether the audiences receive in some sort of maybe even transformative way what we have imagined and brought forward. So you got to get, and Andrew's right. Don't make it the subject of the sentence. Cause this to be a way to support what your imagination has created, and then you go there and you do it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I described our successes. If you want me to, I can describe the places where it really didn't work, but it is just a tool.
That's great. Thank you. Andrew, any thoughts?
I mean, I think Howard and Jax have really said it. I don't think that I can even add a whole lot.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to steal a question in the chat that I think is for you, Andrew, from Matali, which says, would super personalization have the side effect of fragmenting art markets so there's no longer going to be big tent poles on art, music, films to connect us on?
Yeah, no, I saw that. I think that's a really interesting question. I think that I think both can coexist. And I think both would coexist. You think about, I mean, Taylor Swift obviously is a international phenomenon right now that is connecting so many people around not just her music, but the whole culture around Swifties. And yet there's hyper-personalization there, right? Like the way that fans connect on TikTok, and elsewhere, it's sort of a yes and. It gets to be a yes and. This is my personal experience, or the four of our, my little group, our experience with Taylor Swift, and yet it is part of the bigger experience. I'm actually excited about the idea of the hyper-personalized experience because, as I said, having just watched and been in part of this industry for 30 years now, this constant question of how do we get folks to come to the symphony? How do we get folks to come to the theater, to go into our museum when they don't have the cultural literacy, or whatever you want to call it, the education, the understanding or interest in this work? And yet these vaunted institutions, once you're in, can be incredible, right? Just an incredible experience to be in a beautiful space, to be surrounded by music. And so if AI can help lower that barrier in a personalized way, to be able to say, I have literally never been to a classical music concert. Can you please walk me through this in real time? I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think that then becomes incredibly personalized. I think about that from the terms of a novice. You could also think of it in the terms of somebody who has an incredibly deep understanding of a particular work, and asking for guidance on how this is different, or what are new insights that I haven't actually learned before.
That's great. Thank you.
Can I follow Andrew with a thought there?
Yeah.
Because Andrew is right in the center of the target to reduce the distance between a prospective audience member and bringing them into the actual experience of a piece of art. I have a middle ground to advance, and maybe it's an example that would be helpful. When we designed the building, cameras inside, projectors inside, but also outside and on the face of our building, we put our Saturday night concerts up there consistently. That audience is about 2,000 people. The outdoor audience, we call them wall casts. 75% of that audience has never purchased a ticket to the New World Symphony. 80% of that audience comes in groups of 5 or more. It's community, it's outdoors, but it's also the music now for them. Here we are 12, 13 years on, and they are hearing this music, but they didn't come to it because they were convinced to buy a ticket and come indoors to what is a traditional setting. There are so many layers between someone who's out there who's never heard this music before and how you get them a little closer and a little closer and a little closer. And that is personalized. I think it has to be on some level. And of course, Andrew's way out ahead of me because he's thinking broadly about all these disciplines. But that's one example of a waypoint, of a marking point along the way toward You know, these people don't come inside. Maybe they don't ever need to come inside. Maybe that's just fine. But gaining those, hitting those markers along the way is very important. And I think AI is going to take us there.
Interesting. Jax, do you have any thoughts on this personalization question?
Sure. Well, it recently has been a topic at Film Festival Alliance. They're the service organization for independent film festivals and independent exhibitors. And one of the interesting things that came up was generative AI for film exhibitors. So that is just, you know, using this type of marketing, using AI as a marketing tool to better identify your audiences. And this comes up in film a lot, especially when you have some of these larger tech streaming platforms really being the dominant players in that. But I guess that type of technology has been so proprietary and out of reach by smaller arts organizations or even mid-size or a normal-sized organization, that what Andrew's talking about does have the power to put that type of technology in the hands of people who would not otherwise be able to access it. But that's, you know, a little bit different than when we're talking about human artistry, right? It's augmenting the way people do marketing and outreach, and which is equally important for part of this conversation.
That's great, thank you. So if any audience members have any questions, you can feel free to write them in the chat here. I was curious, so Howard mentioned at the end of his comments a question ago about how things sometimes don't work, and you offered to give examples of those. I don't know if that was serious or not, but let me ask this a little bit more generally, which is that, you know, do any of you have examples of AI applications in this field that didn't really work well, or you tried to do things or saw someone try to do something where you're like, oof, that didn't really go well, or the technology is just not there yet, or gosh, we tried this and, you know, the outcome was just not what we wanted to happen. Do you have any examples of that you'd be willing to share, anyone?
I mean, I can speak personally about just working with some of the large language models. I've found, and others, I've heard others say this, that, you know, one of the things that the large language models are good at, or are said to be good at, is coming up with ideas. And so, you know, give me 10 uses, like, you know, part of the research here was just simply asking AI, give me 10 uses of how AI can augment the audience experience. And so I had a multi-day conversation with a large language model about this, coming from all different directions, telling it who it was, telling it who I was, asking it to think completely outside the box, asking it to think very practically, all of those things. And I found that it was interestingly that it just kept giving the same kind of answers. Either sort of things that I already knew or suspected, or things that were so outlandish that it wasn't. So this, I guess that would be sort of a fail in that way, because it didn't actually help so much. On the other hand, I go back to the cassette tape era. I think that there's no question that that's going to get a whole lot better.
One thing that we've done that just didn't make it, and it refers to what Andrew spoke of as the Philadelphia Orchestra trying to augment a performance. There's a gentleman at MIT who we've worked with informally, and he has a new version of that. And we've tried it twice, and over the course of the evening, there are images and descriptions. They are, though, decided by us, not by the audience, which is the first big problem. The second big problem is it's still so primitive that you have to hit the button every time. As a passage is about to happen, you have to hit the button in order to give the information. It's not in any way mechanized. So we have to laugh at the one person in the booth who has to hit the button all evening long. But what's happened is that we find no response from our online audiences to this, or from our in-person audiences. And yet, especially when I sit in the park, which is an audience that does not know that much about music, and I ask them at the end, did you use it? Did you like it? Oh yeah, that was kind of cool. Well, kind of cool is not enough. What we're looking for is something that really locks tight, and that people then begin to use consistently and expect, and that they come through the performance far more informed and transformed.
And Jax, I saw you nodding as I was mentioning failures. I don't know if you had any examples or thoughts.
Yeah, I do have one that's less of the arts application in terms of the creation or distribution of art, but and as Sunil's on this conference as well, who you're all probably familiar with, he is the head of our Office of Research Analysis. We did a recent topic modeling project. And what was so interesting about that, and for people who haven't used topic modeling, it was our first time, it's a text mining tool that can kind of generate themes and a very broad categories, things like that. So we fed it, I don't know how many thousands of grants to just, try to find commonalities between arts and technology. And we had very specific questions, and this was just all contained. But we're really, I was very interested in looking at ways that arts and technologies projects might bridge digital divide or build digital skill sets and what types of things. And I asked too many specific questions. So we really didn't get all of the questions that we wanted to answered, but there was a lot of cool things that came out of it that we learned in terms of how the topic modeling process categorized projects. And that was so helpful in seeing it from a non-human perspective in a way, because we were able to find commonalities across disciplines faster and in a very non-biased way, which I think kind of defies, in that application, it defies ways that we might normally think about AI and generating bias. In a way, it actually helped us remove some bias about how technology may or may not be permeated across different artistic disciplines. And so that was just a really interesting learning process of how to use it. So I guess the big takeaway was that human intervention was essential. And it also reminds me of a few years back, John Maeda put out a book called How to Speak Machine. And I highly recommend that book for anyone who's trying to navigate this world today. Regardless of what generation you're from, I think it's really important to understand the tools and their limitations, because it's going to be constantly changing. And then the other thing that it reminded me of, just as I was thinking about this during this conversation, is at the World Government Summit in Dubai, the NVIDIA CEO had said that coding would no longer be a viable career path for the young generation who might want to go into tech. And they were emphasizing that young generation should really be studying up on, things like farming and agriculture, or like have some other specialized experience other than coding, because AI is becoming more proficient at coding, that you might not actually have to learn how to code the same way as one would have 10 or 20 years ago. So I think we're just in the middle of a massive change. And so we're going to have a lot more failures and successes, but definitely a lot more learning opportunities that could have some happy accidents for sure.
That's great. Thank you so much.
David, could I
yes, please.
Just sort of pulling some of these threads together. It's just so fascinating. I've appreciated Michael Rushton's comments here. I feel like the comment about sort of we're sort of returning to vinyl. I love that notion that actually I think I read somewhere that there were more vinyl sales than CDs last year. And it reminded me of a comment from Ezra Klein, the journalist. I love his podcast. He spends a lot of time talking about AI, and he talks about sort of the sameness that AI can create. And he says, like it's almost sort of like, what was the reaction to fast food was the artisanal food movement. And to the comments, some of the comments that are having here about what about just experiencing an unmediated experience with arts and culture, that could well be one of the outcomes here, that actually going and experiencing art and culture the way that it was in the before times becomes all that more important as everything becomes more of an artificial intelligence generated or augmented experience. That could well be another time stream of the future of this sector.
I wouldn't bet on it.
No, not the artisanal New World Symphony.
Well, there is something going on technologically at every single New World Symphony concert. Sometimes it's just faint lighting that changes, even from movement to movement, certainly piece to piece. There's visuals going on constantly, and our audience will tell us that when they go to a symphony hall and they watch and hear a concert, it seems drab to them.
So far, all of my questions have not been, no LLMs, no AI has been involved in writing my questions. But I'm going to steal one of the questions that Joanna suggested that was written by a bot. And this is for you, Howard, although I think we can generalize it to ask everybody. So the question is, how do you envision the role of traditional educational pathways in the arts evolving? Should educational institutions adapt their curricula to prepare future artists for a collaborative relationship with, scrolled away, with AI? And if so, what key skills should be emphasized? And maybe we can generalize to just be like, what kind of advice do you have for folks who are going into the arts, thinking about it these days?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, these players come to us, they start when they're 7 or 8 years old, and somewhere in there, 12, 13, 14 years old, they think, well, I could actually do this. I can become a musician. And then they spend all that time in the practice room and a few performances. All of a sudden they get to New World, and we expect them to be aware of audience, to be engaging the audience, to the donors, and to be ready to embrace technology. And I will return to one of the things I said before. So most of them are ready. They've already had their cell phone in their pocket forever. This is not a big leap for them. So, and this has also to do with what the usefulness. The AI is just there to be used. So you just have to push them to give it a try. The ones who reject it over the course of their time with us, they either learn not to reject it or to stop talking about rejecting it. So for me, I've watched this now for a long time, and it's their own imaginations take them there and they follow. And the tools are the tools. I've said that 3 times now, but I do believe it. I think that the technology is ready for us to use.
Andrew, can I pose the same question to you? What kind of advice would you give both for, let's say, educational institutions, but also, people who are thinking about going into the arts these days?
As it relates to AI?
Sure. Well,
yeah.
It can.
I mean, in general, I think that that folks going into the arts as a student, and I know that Indiana is doing a bang up job of this, is to make sure that they understand the craft and the business. It's not enough to know the craft. I think it's been long enough now that I graduated from the School of Music back in the day that it was 100% craft and 0% business. And I went and got an arts administration degree, which rounded that out. But as far as AI, yesterday Doug and Joanna both mentioned the researcher Ethan Mollick, who's really sort of out in front of sort of making AI a little more understandable and palatable for us regular humans. And as an educator, he's hugely bullish on the power of AI, especially in sort of being a tutor. And he talks a lot about you've got a class of 100 students, and they're all sort of taking it in different things. But they're coming at it from different directions. They're coming at it from different backgrounds. But being able to actually use AI to personalize that experience to them, to actually be able to ask it questions and have it actually be something of a tutor for you. The founder of the Khan Academy is just coming out with a book about this. Khan Academy has been very bullish on AI and using AI in education. And I think whether or not that's the right direction or not, I think that there's a ton of work being done on this, and I think it'll only get more sophisticated.
That's great. Thank you. And Jax, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to give you the last word of the whole panel on what kind of advice, no pressure, on what kind of advice you might give both the educational institutions and, folks going into the field these days.
Yeah, I was recently at a conference held by A2RU, which is an alliance for arts research universities. And the focus of the conference was on creativity, empathy, and AI. So I highly recommend people to go look up that conference because it was all arts educators working in universities thinking about these issues so intimately. And it's not just an arts issue. It's like, you know, there's people in computer science going up and teaching their generations of how to use AI ethically, not just use it. But the thing I really want to say is the most important piece of equipment is your brain. And where I went to school at the Alfred University's Institute for Electronic Arts, it was always about understanding how things work, and then understanding yourself, and having a lot of mindfulness when we use technology. So kind of backing up what Howard and Andrew are both saying, it's about learning how to integrate it as a tool and not dominate it. And I'll just put in this PDF from it's a short article that Maya Deren had written, who was a early filmmaker, and it's really talking about filmmaking and filmmaking tools, but it's really about not buying the most expensive tools or equipment. It's about how you're using yourself to its best capability. So anyway, some fun media studies things there.
What a great way to end the panel. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of our panelists, and thanks for the audience. And now I'm going to pass things back over to you, Doug and Joanna.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. A virtual and actual round of applause for our panelists and wonderful moderating. I love this conversation. And unfortunately, we can't do it all day because it's a Friday, but that was great. So thank you. I'll welcome back Joanna to this.
Thanks. You can hear me well, right?
Yeah, now we
have
got
a little bit of difference. Thanks. Yeah, so we won't hold you for a long time, but we did want to make some comments about what we've seen throughout today and maybe how it links from yesterday. First off, again, thanks to all of our panelists, to our audience members, but we know it's a Friday afternoon. But I just wanted to highlight on some of the topics that I think have come up throughout the day, throughout yesterday, and maybe how they relate. And I know that Doug has been madly writing a blog post behind the scenes, so I know he has a lot to say about this too. So Doug, feel free to jump in. Today, I honestly had the chance to relax enough to actually listen to the presentations because yesterday I was emceeing. So I would like to say that I got more in today than I did yesterday, which was great. But you know, we had our keynoters, Brett and Lyndon, who were just excellent because, to be honest, for me, Brett and Lyndon really exemplified the AI enthusiast that I really wanted to come out of this symposium. But just the amount of examples and the illustration of the prevalence of this technology in the arts and cultural sector, even though we might not think it's, you know, so prevalent, and I've heard the words up and coming or emerging throughout the last 2 days, I think we really are learning that so many organizations like Howard's organization are readily adapting AI technologies in the presentation of art and also in the audience experience. So that was something that I really took from Brett and Lyndon's presentations. The research panel was really particularly interesting today and yesterday because I would have flipped them, you know, across the 2 days. But today was really interesting because as researchers, we tend to not think that we're so connected to what's going on in the actual sector. But I think today we saw all three of the research presentations that we have these collaborations already taking place. And one thing I learned from the research panel today and yesterday was that the need for these collaborations is really great. So it was great to see the NSF collaboration that Jax pointed to. And I know that there are a couple of other NSF collaborations between tech and art, but the idea of getting artists, arts presenters, arts organizations, researchers, and technologists all in the same room, I think is really kind of an ever-pressing need. But it was nice to see little tidbits of that throughout the research panels. The roundtables, it was funny because, again, I think I don't know, I maybe would have reversed the 2 roundtables from yesterday to today. But at the same time, we talked a lot about how yesterday we had a very much sort of pessimistic perspective on what we were discussing. And today we really turned the tables. We talked much more about the optimism of the opportunity of using AI technologies in arts presentation. And obviously we kind of always, you know, go back to arts production, because it's hard not to talk about this in terms of how artists and creators are using AI. But we really turned the tables today. And so this last panel today was really showing me that there is a lot of optimism. So a lot of practical applications, but changed the course of the way we were thinking to this optimistic perspective. So I just wanted to say what I took away from this optimistic perspective. So for me, today was like a day of AI enthusiasts. And this is what I was kind of taking from the symposium as a whole, which is probably why you saw my chats pushing back against a lot of the fears and the threats of AI. I really wanted to focus on, well, you know, we're maybe afraid right now, but actually we're afraid of technology a lot. It's actually a very common theme of when we see anything new, change is always scary. Right? But today we saw that change can actually be adapted really quite well if you work with that change as your friend, right? As opposed to looking at these technologies as our enemy, the more we think about how to combine these technologies with what we're actually doing, the humans can stay ahead of the wave. That's what I'm constantly thinking. You know, if AI is this tidal wave that's coming into our engagement in the arts, we have the power and the intelligence as humans to keep ahead of that wave and not get crushed. So I saw a few different ways that we could stay ahead of that in terms of, you know, the AI overtaking us. So accessibility improvements. So the idea of real-time captioning, and Lyndon pointed to that, reaching new audiences. Andrew pointed to that. And so these effects on consumers can actually be really, really positive. The efficiency improvements, I think we saw a lot of examples of that. Ticketing systems, marketing assistance. The demonstration example that we had today, I thought was a great example of how we can actually have these efficiency improvements in the creation of art. And then, of course, these experiential enhancements. And I think Howard's work points a lot to that at the New World Symphony. And then Nandini's presentation. And this really has this effect on both the market, the larger market, and the effect on consumers. So I wanted to point out what I saw as kind of the optimism, the positives. But I mean, Doug, you're always my pessimistic collaborator, so maybe you can offer a counter view.
But notice, as a pessimist, I was the one emceeing the enthusiasts today, and it was the other way around. But I will say that I'm struck by a couple undercurrents in all of this symposium, and they're truisms in my sense of a lot of how I see the arts and culture sector and a lot of these conversations going. And one is that the arts and culture sector to me is surprisingly conservative, maybe not in a political sense, but wow, am I never cease to be amazed by how much we want to maintain the way things have always been and the way things are, despite a lot of global forces that push against that. And it's always shocking to me that the arts community, when they get together, gets so conservative sometimes. And I think that's an interesting lens to see this AI engagement or arts engagement in an AI world through that lens. The other one is, it also never ceases to amaze me how quickly and vigorously we come back to the arts and culture sector is defined by artists and creatives, rather than having it defined as much by the audiences and the consumers and the viewers and the patrons of the arts. We put artists and creatives first in line usually. And I think part of this gets to some of the Annie Tubagi's comments, but a lot of this change is probably going to have some winners and losers. Some people are going to benefit from it more and some people won't. And I'm kind of excited about it. I'm not sure how much I need more AI art in my life, but I also know that's not really a relevant question. It's coming. It's out. Do I not want the internet? I don't have a choice over this. The question is, what am I going to do with it, and what do I think is going to happen from it? And then if we're worried about some people or some groups not faring as well, I think we can pay attention to that. But I think we should not underestimate or discount the amazing benefits that this has and the promise it has, the potential benefits to other groups that might not be the creatives and the artists. It might be the consumers, it might be the audiences, it might be people being able to engage with arts that were arts were leaving them behind. There's all sorts of potential there for a lot of winners. And I don't want us in the conversation to lose sight and lose appreciation for what might be a massive boom in the arts and creativity realm that is partly AI empowered. And all those winners, there's a lot more viewers of the arts than there are superstars out there producing it, or even starving artists trying to make it. And I don't want to discount them. So that's my other big takeaway when I look at all of this. But I'd also echo everything Joanna said. There's some exciting examples. I love learning about all these cool examples of things that have already been happening. And I'm excited to see more of them as we go forward.
And I'll probably I'll end with just one anecdote, which gets to all of this. So I took a group of 11 undergraduates to Switzerland a couple weeks ago, and it was a course. I taught a course on the cultural and creative industries for 2 weeks, where I introduced them to all sorts of people, all sorts of experiences in the cultural and creative industries. And one of the things I did was I took them to a 3.5-hour opera, Benjamin Britten opera, Midsummer Night's Dream. And it was sung in English, but it was sung by mainly Swiss artists, so who have a little bit of an accent when they're singing operatic music in English. And then the subtitles were in German. So you can imagine that it was really hard to understand for my, actually they were all American undergraduate students from Indiana University. And so I got the survey back and I got to read about how they liked the trip and how they liked the course. And 9 times out of 10, they did not like the opera. They said they didn't understand what was going on. They wished that wasn't part of the course. And I just started to, and what was amazing to me is that I actually loved that part. But what I started to think here was, how could I have enhanced their experience with some sort of technology, either prior to or during this operatic performance? And I thought, wouldn't it be great if it wasn't so taboo to take out your phone and have had some sort of real-time interpretation of what was going on? Because not all of them had actually even read A Midsummer Night's Dream, so they didn't even really know the story. So wouldn't it be great if they could have actually had that real-time engagement, so it could have helped their experience? And so, I don't know, for me, that would have helped their experience. I think it probably would have helped mine too, because then I wouldn't have gotten really bad evaluations on that particular part of the trip. But I do think that there is just a lot of promise here. And, again, going back to Doug's point, we're fairly conservative in the arts and cultural sector. So, making it not so taboo to use a computer during an operatic performance, I think, is not so bad. But so we will end, because we're 3 minutes until 1 and we don't want to keep everybody. But thank you, everybody, for your participation, for your engagement. Especially thank you to our panelists. The diverse array of the people that we had speak over the past 2 days was really, really excellent. And we've heard from so many different perspectives. And we will be following up. So don't fear, we will be writing something up and reaching out. So our hope is to continue the conversation and to have this be a constant form of discussion that we sort of help moderate here at the AEI Lab at the Center for Cultural Affairs. So and last but certainly not least, I want to thank our staff who have been in the background running this entire symposium. So thank you so much to our staff. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do anything without you. So
yes, thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, a great summer, and we hear from you soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.